Good morning everyone and welcome to the City Lifestyle Committee meeting of the 30th of September. I declare the meeting open at 10:05am. I'd like to advise meeting attendees that this meeting is being audio recorded, and I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet and paying my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I've received a leave of absence from Councillor Russell, who's unable to be with us today. I believe all other councillors are present, so I therefore move to accept leave of absence from Councillor Russell. Can I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Hall has seconded the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is unanimously supported. The Mayor, Mr Mayor, you had your hand up, didn't you?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, unanimously supported. Sorry. Thank you. We're just keeping an eye on you. Just a reminder, councillors, that we'll actually have a deputation at around 10:30 this morning from QRL, which will be, I'm sure, a highlight for many of us. So we'll try and stay on point so that we're not running too far behind with regard to our special visitors for today. I'll be moving things around a little bit, so we're going to commence with item 6.1, which is on page 61 of the agenda, and that's our Access and Inclusion Plan from 2019 to 2021, and it's the first annual progress report. I'll now ask the Community Services Manager, Mr Nick Maguire, to please enter the discussions, but before we get underway, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest that they wish to declare?
Thank you.
There being none, I'd now like to welcome Nick and Michelle to provide us with their report, please.
Thanks, Councillor Karansky. This report that's been presented to you today on the first annual progress report was an action from our community. They requested yearly if we could give an update on our strategy for the Access and Inclusion Plan. So this is the very first one that we've done at Council. We have 84 actions across 9 different priority areas in the strategy. If you guys haven't seen it, I'm more than happy to provide you with a copy. But this report just goes over some of the highlights. And I suppose one thing to really sort of point out is that this is, although Community Services reports on our Access and Inclusion Plan, it's a whole of council document. There are a multitude of branches across the organisation that deliver some really fantastic things in the access and inclusion space. So we don't do that on our own. Everyone else does all the work. We just get to report on the amazing things. So in here you'll notice as well under the resource section, what I think is really such a positive thing to report on is the fact that we have spent over $1 million on operational costs and capital costs in the last 12 months. That's not additional money, that's just operational funds that exist that branches have expended, thinking positively about how we can work on access and inclusion. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Thank you, Michelle. I've got a question from Councillor Lane.
Hey Michelle, hey Nick. Just a quick one. Congratulations on the work that's gone into the inclusivity for people with disabilities. I know that disabilities don't always present themselves as a physical appearance disability. Not everyone's in a wheelchair. People have aphasia, they have a range of disabilities, and having disability first aid options within council I think is a very important part of the process. Being inclusive of people with disabilities through disability employment programs is also very important, and I just wanted to congratulate you guys on working in that sphere. People with disabilities contribute massively to our economy and to our community, and they give us insights that sometimes we might forget in the hustle and bustle of normal world. So thanks very much.
Thanks. Well said, Councillor Lane. Any other councillors have any comments? Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I just wanted to say I think it's wonderful what you've done the last 12 months, certainly in all the projects you've sort of gone through. I just want to mention a couple of things sort of moving forward. Just in terms of the community requesting disabled bathrooms and things in older facilities, how is that being rolled out, I guess, through council facilities moving forward as part of the next stage, please?
I'm not probably the best person to answer that question. It sits under Nigel's branch, but we have the work as a part of this plan is to look at investigating how we can do that better. So a part of that was that we know that there are standardised processes that we need to go through, but we know that we can do better in our facilities as well. So actions as a part of this are to investigate and work on how we can do that in our facilities. I would need to come back to you to sort of talk more specifically about the processes around our facilities. Nick's got an answer for you, so I'm just going to pass to you.
Through you, Madam Chair. Councillor Stemp, so yeah, Nigel's team have an annual maintenance program, but they also have a renewals program, and I know we work very closely with Nigel's team to make sure that those sorts of accessibility requirements and inclusions are considered as part of that approach. So it's just looking at, like Michelle said, how we build those sorts of requirements into those sorts of maintenance and renewal programs to ensure our facilities, as they are being renewed, which the Beanley Aquatic Centre is a really good example of that. So some of the inclusions that were added in there as part of the renewal of that facility, we're focused around these sorts of access and inclusion requirements. So it's just making sure that we continue to work together and that we set the bar high when it comes to making sure that our facilities are accessible for everybody.
Sorry, can I also just mention too, many seniors have come to me during their campaign indicating that they would love to see some more parking in facilities for seniors because of the distance they have to walk. I know that we've obviously got an ageing population, and I'm just curious to see if that's something that's being factored into the future. I don't know how it would actually operate, to be honest, but it is something that has been brought to my attention. So I just wanted to make a note of that too, if that could be something that could be considered for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Stemp. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk. I know in the last term there was a lot of changes to the pool in Underwood, the Logan North Aquatic pool, to actually, for disability purposes. There were a number of quite active members of the public who made sure that their desires were or their issues were addressed, I suppose, to deal with parking and showers and other things. So, yeah, I just want to pass that on. That's all. Just
Thank you,
FYI.
Councillor Bradley. Any other councillors? Councillors, the motion is on the board ahead of you. Can I have a mover for that motion, please? Councillor Bradley has moved. Councillor Lane has seconded. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is unanimously supported. Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, Nick. Councillors, we now move to item 6.2, which is Live Well Logan, Move It Logan and Crank School Holiday Programs Outcome Report for 2019 and 2020 financial year. That's on page 98 of your agenda. And once again, I'll pass over to Michelle and Nick to provide their report. Before I get underway, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest that they wish to declare? There being none, I will now move over to Nick and Michelle to provide the report. Thank you.
Thank you. This report just provides, like Councillor Kerensky said, an update for the last 12 months of Crank and Live Well Logan, and we also took the opportunity to report on Move It Logan, which was a 12-month federally funded program that provided physical activities for people with disability, predominantly. A lot of the information provided in the background report and this report is just some really positive feedback from our community members about attending those activities. We've also been able to move a number of the Move It Logan programs that were previously funded into our existing Live Well Logan program moving forward, which is a real success, and obviously the government see that as a real success as well. We've noted in here some of those challenges that we experience with the programs and just took the opportunity to provide those to you. It's in a really positive way. The programs have grown so much and the community love them that they're sort of outgrowing, I suppose, the budget, the paper that we provide and things like that. So there's just a real need for us to continue to be really solutions focused in my team, to look at an online booking system which the community are craving, and also to look at how we can intelligently provide more activities specifically for our young people that, as you're all aware, the Crank School Holiday Program books out within a week. So we've done a lot to streamline our processes and do as much as we can sort of in that budget. So we just sort of noted some of those challenges and what we will continue to do over the next 12 months to see what we can progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Bradley has a question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Look, this is well loved in the community, so thank you for continuing it. Can I, just as a FYI, I hear you say about the online booking, which is awesome. Just going forward, can I please not have paper versions of Crank, etc.? Can I just only have electronic to share out publicly, please? Thank you.
The electronic version of the booklet, is that what you...
Yeah, and the Live Well Logan, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I agree these are really good programs. I've been part of all these, and the community always talk about them. I guess you indicated obviously people are being turned away because we've just got such great demand. Is it that do you need more organisations to offer like Crank activities and things? Is that what's now? If there was an organisation out in the community that was interested, is it something that you're chasing, or is it more of a budget issue of providing the additional services?
Yeah, it's definitely more of the budget side of it. We, as an example, in the previous financial year, we could have funded for Live Well Logan specifically, over $300,000 worth of activities based on what people quoted to us to deliver, and we had $150,000. So we have a lot of really great local organisations and people in the surrounding areas that deliver activities that quote each year. We go out, so we're always looking for new things, but it's definitely more that we have less budget than what we have people offering services.
Sure. Thank you.
I
Something to
trust
look forward to.
councillors hear that. They
Yeah.
don't have enough budget to deliver the services. I'll just flag that with you. Anything further, Councillor Stamp? Thank you. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Through the chair. I think Crank's awesome. My kids love it. They're booked into 3 things over the next couple of days. My kids are doing kitchen chemistry tomorrow. They're doing go-karting on Friday, and I think they're booked into something else, but I can't remember because I've got to go pick up the library pack. I think it's awesome. And I was talking to Nick about this last night. I think it'd be really good if you did like a Q&A with kids to see what they want to do, much like toy testers in Kmart for Christmas time and that sort of thing. You know, I'm pretty sure we've all got kids that would be really heavily involved in that. My kids were giving Nick feedback last night and that sort of thing, because it is very hotly contested to get into those Crank online programs, and even when they are online they still book out, which is fantastic to see, and that sort of thing. So well done. I think it's awesome, and I think it can only grow from here, so well done.
Can I just provide comment to that quickly? Every year we do surveys to young people for both Live Well Logan and Crank, and probably why they're so popular, because it changes so rapidly with what people are, and especially the young kids, what they're wanting. So we go out every year before we do that next program to actually ask the young kids. So we'll just make sure it hasn't been done, since you guys have been in, but it'll be going out soon. So we'll just make sure that we send out the links, and then you guys can also send it out.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about with it being online is it's only going to capture those people that are online and that sort of thing. So that's my only concern, that you're not capturing all of the kids in all of the areas and that sort of thing, because I know I've been hitting my P&Cs up lately, and I've shared with them the Grandparents' Day cards that we've got coming, and the other postcards that we've had. So I've shared both of those with my P&Cs and that sort of thing, and they've never had that before and that sort of thing. So I think we've just got to get it a bit wider in the community and that sort of thing, because I know people in my community, like I've got friends that are asking me going, oh, how did you get into that? And I'm like, oh, it's on Crank, and they haven't heard of it and stuff like that, which is bizarre, but they're just sort of filtering. I'm just sort of filtering it through to them now and that sort of thing. So,
Councillor Wilcox, I know that you're a huge advocate of this one. I guess the challenge is that if we go out and market this more heavily, we actually can't meet the demand.
yes, I
And
know.
so
That
that's-
is a concern, because it sold out in June, and I was like,
And that's what I'm
"Aw."
hearing from you. So certainly, councillors, that might be something we need to consider moving forward, whether we may in fact need additional funding pools to support this more readily. And I know from my own experience, it's absolutely loved to death.
Yep.
Anything further, Councillor Wilcox?
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
So interestingly enough, I was down talking with the Hurricane Stars just last week, and they've modelled a school holiday program based on Logan City Council's Crank program. And they actually attract not just the kids, but also the parents as part of their program. So they look at what Logan City Council is doing, and they try and create a program, a school holiday program, similar to, but which is inclusive of parents, because some parents don't want to let their children go to school holiday programs and other kids just don't fit in. So this community group has stepped in and has created this program operating out of a very small building on Mays Avenue, and has managed to, with just 4 volunteers, undertake some school programs, school holiday programs. So congratulations on the success of CRANK, but in the same vein, is there some way in which, if other groups want to try and take this on, whether there's a sharing capacity from council with them?
Yeah, definitely. And we're happy to, if you come across people that are doing that, we're happy to call them and have a chat to them. So most definitely.
Excellent, thank you.
That.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillor? There being none, could I have someone please move that the report be adopted? Thank you, councillor Wilcox, seconded by councillor Stemp. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's unanimously supported. However, I note councillor Bannon's out of the room at the moment. Okay, moving forward, has anyone got any general business from the community services team? I do, for just a brief moment, if I may. I just wanted to congratulate you on the Logan Youth Action Group meeting that was held last night. 5 councillors were able to attend, so we had councillor Stemp, councillor Wilcox, councillor Herremeyer, and who did I miss? Of course, councillor Lane. It was a fantastic evening, really, really good, and so pleased to see such a huge cross-section of young people from all across the city of Logan and from all kinds of backgrounds. And congratulations in particular to Maddie, who managed to coordinate the evening ever so well. Of course, you, Michelle, Alex, and the rest of the team. It was a great night, and I'm really excited to see what the team comes up with moving forward in terms of the projects that they want to champion. So please pass on our sincere thanks with regard to that. Nick, did you have a GB item?
Yeah, just a quick one. Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add something to the Live Well Logan and CRANK conversation, if I could. It's just, I guess essentially it's a shout out to Michelle and her team. Renee, who's sitting up there in the bleachers this morning. So just essentially to say that normally when CRANK and Live Well Logan are programmed, they're programmed on an annual basis, and because of COVID-19 this year, they've gone from being a face-to-face program to an online program and back to a face-to-face program in a COVID-safe kind of environment. So, you know, special shout out to the team, because they've literally moved mountains this year to make sure that those programs can continue to be delivered for the community, and they've done a phenomenal job. So I just wanted to make a mention of that, if I could. Awesome,
thank you. I know our communities appreciate it. All right, thank you, team. Well, moving on. Councillors, I'll now refer to item 4.1. Can the City Standards and Animal Care Manager, Mr Shane Mansfield, make his way up to the podium here? And before we get underway with discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they need to declare? There being none, I'll ask the manager to deliver his report. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you, councillor. This is the continuation of our local law amending process. Council has previously resolved on the 26th of August to amend Local Law 7 to increase the penalty for parking in disability parking bays without a permit. Council received the background to this, and again, it's primarily because the state has increased the penalty from 4 penalty units to 2. Our local laws are inherently required to be consistent with the state direction in that respect. Queensland Police Service issue penalties for the same offences on occasion, so it's very important to be consistent. In the previous report from the Manager for Community Services, it was also highlighted a status report on the Access and Inclusion Plan. This direction of Council also aligns to a key direction of the Access and Inclusion Plan. At this stage, the report proposes via a formal amending local law document to statutory instrument to effect and propose the amendments in process. As part of that, we'll go out to community engagement on an informed basis only, because it is a low level of community engagement, and also the report proposes a state interest check. All of those processes are required under the Local Government Act to effect the correct local law making process. The next report that will be delivered to committee will highlight the outcome of community engagement and also the public interest checks in that respect. I accordingly recommend the statutory instrument for proposal to be adopted by elected members. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Questions from councillors. We'll commence with Councillor Lane.
Thank you very much. Shane, just a quick question, page 19 of the report, issue of a permit for local government parking permits. We have a situation down off Wembley Road in Sylvania Street and Mooney Street where businesses are becoming so prevalent down there that backstreet parking has now been regulated by parking bays and yellow lines. And there are a number of people that have lived there for 40, 50 years. Some of them are renters, some of them can't afford to amend their properties to, conform to their physical requirements. Some, their landlords won't amend their properties. And there is one case of a gentleman who was visited by the parking crew when there was a proposal to put yellow lines and parking bays in his street. And he said, well, look, love, people park in front of my house all the time and it really drives me nuts because that's where I want to park. And she said, all right, well, we're going to put a yellow line here and no one can park there. And he thought, great, you little ripper. And so he started parking there because he thought that that meant that he could park there. He didn't know what the yellow line meant and he was actually illiterate. So when he got his first notice, he ignored it, thinking it was something for the landlord. When he got his second notice, he ignored that too, thinking again it was something for the landlord. But when Spur came and knocking on his door, he started fretting because he's a disability pensioner and couldn't afford to pay the increased costs. So the issue of permits in those streets, is that possible for permanent tenants who cannot access a driveway? Is that something that council is doing? I noticed that it's written in here. I just thought I'd ask that question as part of this.
Certainly, there's two parts to that. I actually have it programmed today to speak to you about that exact situation because I have reviewed that personally and it's separate to this report.
Yep.
The local law itself, Local Law 7, does provide provisions for Logan City Council to issue permits. The permits are issued by the Roads Infrastructure Planning Branch. We actually don't issue the permits, but I can certainly speak to Kamal and Carl to liaise with you in that respect. And certainly in respect to the specific situation, I'll be speaking to you about that very shortly.
Thanks very much. And just one of the other things is people don't know what a yellow line means. There are people parking on yellow lines throughout the city. They just see a yellow line and go, oh, there's a yellow line there. Thanks very much. They actually don't get it. And people that have never been into Brisbane don't understand some of the parking regulations and things. They've never had them. We've got people who've lived in this city who've never been to Brisbane. As odd as that sounds, it's actually true. So when we introduce something new, the promotion of it in multiple languages is very important, but also the information sharing with senior groups is essential, I think.
Certainly, I can take those points on board, and we do publicise articles on key parking regulations in the City magazine from time to time. We can certainly reactivate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you so much. I just have a question, and I'm not sure if this is a general business, Shane, or whether it is part of this local law. And please correct me which way. At the moment, the local law from memory allows trucks to be parked in Springwood business area. I'm just wondering, with all the changes that are occurring in Springwood, is it possible to review that? Because once upon a time it was probably more for that, for the more industrial sort of type of usage, but the usage is changing now. Is it possible to review that?
Certainly, we can bring back that to a council briefing session. The subordinate local law that sits under the parking local law, subordinate local law number 7.2, details all of the heavy vehicle parking on road exemptions and requirements.
Do you need a council resolution for it?
I can
to
take
change
that on
it?
board, certainly.
Do you need a council resolution? Just a question.
I'm not too sure if you need...
Shane was talking about bringing this back to a
change the
workshop.
parking. Do you need a council resolution to change it?
Oh, sorry, to amend the law? Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
You
Sorry,
do.
I was intending to brief elected members in terms of what is contained, what are the areas currently
Yes.
within the local law, and if there's any desire to change that, that would certainly require 100% a report back to committee. And again, if there were changes, it would enact another local law making process, yes.
Thank you, Shane. It would be appreciated if we could raise this again in the workshop that we've got coming up with regard to this. That'd be great. Does anyone have any other questions specifically relating to this report? No, there being no further questions, the recommendations are on the board in front of you. Do I have a mover for the motion? Councillor Raven has moved the motion. Councillor Bannon has seconded. By a show of hands, can I see your support? And that is unanimously supported. Thank you, councillors. That marks the end of the City Standards and Animal Care Manager's report. Shane, do you have any GB for us?
Thank you, Councillor. No specific GB. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have any GB for the manager? Councillor Lane?
Thank you very much. Shane, I just wanted to give you some feedback. There was a random rooster haunting a local community, and it was driving people nuts at 3 a.m. This rooster didn't know where it was, who it was messing with, but your animal standards people certainly took care of it, and the message coming back into my email that the rooster has been apprehended was quite good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll convey that. Thank you, Councillor.
Speaking of roosters, no. Okay, thank you very much, Shane, appreciate that. I'll now refer councillors to item 5.1. Can the Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager, Mr Nigel Brown, please enter discussions? And this is, of course, the deputation presentation from Queensland Rugby League who've come in to see us today. So before we get underway, councillors, can I ask if you have any conflicts of interest you wish to declare? There being none, I'll now hand over to the manager. Thank you,
Thank
Nigel.
you. Through the Chair, it's my very great pleasure to welcome representatives from the QRL who are presenting. They requested this opportunity, and thank you for councillors for allowing this to happen. So I'll invite our team to come forward. So we have Robert Moore, Managing Director of QRL, and I'll let Robert introduce the rest of his team. He'll do a far better job than I.
Thanks, Nigel.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for the opportunity to come and have a chat today. It's great to be out here as a group, and to start things off I'd just introduce the rest of the team here. Sitting at the front's Adam Van Zanten. Adam is the Region Manager for South East, and over the other side Arthur Eustace-Earl, who's our Government Relations Manager. Importantly, Brad Talon, the Chairman of South East Region and a board member of the QRL, and Brian Canavan, who is a delegate on the South East Region Board. And Brian has extensive experience in the game in Sydney NRL clubs and the NRL, and has moved back up to Queensland as a proud Queenslander, and is now on the board of South East and assisting particularly in matters that relate to development of the game through the South East region. So it's great to have these guys here today. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to come along. Our plan today is to talk a little bit about rugby league in the area as well as in the state, just to give you a bit of an overview of where we're at. It's timely, bearing in mind the year that we've had through COVID and the year that we will probably have into next year as well. The first thing I think from our point of view is to admit the failings of the past, and that we, to use a rugby league sort of vernacular, would have dropped the ball in relation to the game in Logan. And that we accept that, we understand that. Part of our issues were that we didn't take control in the past of all the various entities within the game who wanted to have an interest in Logan. So what we've now ended up with, and it's not just specifically Logan, it happened in far north Queensland as well, where we have too many people with fingers in the pie with no coordination, no leadership. So that's part of the reason we're here. We want to turn that around, but we are big enough to admit that we've made some mistakes in the past. So there's a presentation, obviously, which you've already had. I assume you have. So hopefully there's some questions at the end. We'll quickly run through the contents. Thanks, Adam, if you just put them all up on there. We decided that we might throw up a video first to start off when we get to that, because it's a lot better than hearing me speak, and it just gives you a bit of an overview of some of the things that we've been involved in through 2019. I'm not sure if we'll do a video year in review for 2020 because it's been so different. but 2019 was a pretty good year for us. We'll do a video of that. We'll talk a little bit about participation this year, and there's some interesting stats coming out of that. We'll talk a bit about our priorities at the QRL and the impacts of COVID and how we've handled that, and also some plans for 2021. And in amongst that, we'll delve into some stats and data around the Logan area as well. So I might just get the video sort of up first, and before we start that, no, it started? That's okay. We'll talk a bit after it. It goes for about 4 minutes. We'll let the video run, and then I'll come back on and continue on.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. On the field, rugby league in Queensland experienced an increase in participation numbers across the board in 2019. Female participation was once again the major growth area, and Queensland Rugby League continues to invest in female pathways with the announcement of a women's statewide competition beginning in 2020.
On the way to the try line, on the way to the premiership, Sean Fell, she gets the third. The Panthers get their first premiership. The Panthers are the winners.
This year also saw the player development framework rolled out through selected competitions in southeast Queensland, with an overall positive response from families involved in the environment that the framework creates.
Really fun. Really good.
As the game continues to broaden its market, we saw the first ever State of Origin game played in Perth, with Queensland going down 2-1 in another close series.
Queensland kick off in game number 2.
Moses Mbai, Joe Offengawi, David Fafita, Corey Norman, Christian Welsh and Ethan Lowe pulled on the Maroons jersey for the first time during the series.
Ethan Lowe, straight as a dime.
Hardworking back rower Matt Gillett notched up his 20th game for the Maroons before injuries forced him to announce his retirement from the game in October. A proud moment for the QRL ahead of State of Origin was to reveal that moving forward, the Queensland women's team would be known as the Harvey Norman Queensland Maroons.
I just wish some of my old mates were sitting there having a look at this, and obviously it's got a lot to do with what they did.
After a great performance in another epic Origin game, Annette Brander was named the Harvey Norman Queensland Women's Representative Player of the Year. The Queensland Murray under-16 team kicked off the rep season, beating the New South Wales Koori team 28-20 in Mudgee. The Queensland under-18 team followed suit with a 34-12 win over New South Wales. The game exposed super talent Xavier Coates, who was man of the match. He then went on to make his NRL debut for the Brisbane Broncos and win the 4X Queensland Men's Representative Player of the Year award. Other state-level triumphs included our 4X Queensland residents' 42-22 win over New South Wales and the Queensland University's 28-10 win over New South Wales Tertiary. The Queensland under-16 City versus Country clash rounded out the rep calendar, with Country winning 44-4 on Intrust Super Cup Grand Final Day. With the health and well-being of players a primary focus for the QRL, concussion management protocols were introduced across all major competitions in 2019. The Intrust Super Cup continues to be an outstanding pathway to the elite level, with 19 Intrust Super Cup players making their NRL debut in the 2019 season. 2 referees also signed full-time NRL contracts and 2 coaches signed with NRL clubs for the 2020 season. Ipswich Jets co-coaches Ben and Shane Walker overtook Wayne Trelevin for the most games coached in the Intrust Super Cup with a tally of 219. Minor premiers Sunshine Coast Falcons were unable to maintain their phenomenal regular season form during the finals, with Burleigh Bears clinching the Intrust Super Cup title with a win over Wynnum Manly Seagulls.
Ices it for the Burleigh Bears, who will win the title.
Bears halfback Jamal Fogarty was named the Petro Sivana medalist, Intrust Super Cup's best and fairest. In the Hastings Deering Colts, Townsville Blackhawks won the minor premiership, but Sunshine Coast Falcons went on to beat Wynnum Manly Seagulls 34-28 in the grand final.
Northern Pride's Tom McGrath took out the Hastings Deering Colts Player of the Year award. And in the Auswide Bank Malmaninga Cup, Tweed Seagulls beat Wynnum Manly Seagulls 28-24 in the grand final and went on to win the national title.
Underneath the post, right on cue.
And Tweed will celebrate. They have won the national final.
Joshua James from Norths Devils and Hamiso Tabuai Fido from Townsville Blackhawks were named Auswide Bank Malmaninga Cup Players of the Year. Off the field, the QRL was once again heavily involved in community activity. For the 7th year in a row, QRL sent Intrust Super Cup games to the regions during Get in the Game Country Week with the support of BHP, bringing much needed infrastructure, finances and aspirations to the locals of these communities.
And we'll just have a pause.
No, that's all right.
Are we progressing?
That's okay. You probably got the gist of some of the things that we're involved with. It's a pity we just missed the last part of going into some of the community activities because they are extensive and they are all over the state. There's a few key things out of that and I just wanted to touch on. You would have seen the emphasis placed on the women's game. You also would have seen it talk about the Player Development Framework, which is a new framework for the safety and the development of players through the grades. And I just need to give a shout out to the South East region because they've led the way in both those initiatives. So we're seeing the results of both of them in the South East before the other regions of Queensland. It's clear that we've got an extensive representative program and we have an extensive list of representative players that come from the Logan region. And that's something we'd like to continue, obviously. With 19 players, 2 refs and 2 coaches in one season coming out of Intrust Super Cup into the NRL, that's a great benefit for us and justification of the pathways that we currently have. We'll just, we're already up there. Just move on, have a look a little bit about participation across the state. The video touched on some growth into 19 and the previous few years there has been growth, but it's been small growth, which is a trend probably consistent across most sports at the moment. And a view of holding your own is probably a good thing at this stage. We were looking forward to a very, very strong 2020. We had in the off-season negotiated $2 million of extra funding through a grassroots fund into Queensland out of the NRL, and COVID unfortunately stopped pretty much all of that. So we haven't been able to invest that money, unfortunately, and we would have seen, we think, strong growth in participation over the state in 2020 if it had been for that. It's interesting to note, though, the 2020 numbers there of 51-odd thousand is very significant, with a 16% drop with what's happened this year. That's an enormous effort, I think, for us, particularly in the southeast. There are whole leagues in the north of Queensland that didn't play at all. But in the southeast, the region here has been, they've been a key to actually making sure that return to play was handled well, and we've had all leagues up and running and most clubs up and running, which has been a great result for us, particularly in this area as well. We'll have a look at them in a minute. I think also the work that we did with the region, with Arthur and others in the QRL with our return to play strategy and protocols, working with government on that, I think they're probably the best across sport, and we know they've been used by other sports that didn't have the capacity to actually develop their own. So we've done a lot of work on that, and I think without that we wouldn't have been playing this season. So there's a heap of work's gone into it, but it's ended up, numbers-wise, a pretty good season for us, although it did put a lot of strain on our volunteers and others to manage COVID-safe venues as well as their normal work that they do, promoting our game and running our game. So if we have a look at age groups, the next one, thanks Adam. Age groups specifically, this is just a breakdown on some of this. It's statewide numbers. The interesting thing to me here is they probably expected the reductions that we see in these numbers, but the interesting thing for me is the 19 plus I would have expected would be far worse than it actually ended up. Although it's the biggest drop that we had, it was going to be one of the toughest ones because, as I said, there's whole leagues that didn't even start. So the Toowoomba Rugby League didn't start. However, 2 teams out of Toowoomba three played in the Southeast competition, or the Ipswich competition. So there was some footy, but there was whole leagues that didn't actually play at all. So I think that drop in senior players, was a good result considering what was happening. I think it's really encouraging if you look at the 13s to 15s age group, which is it only had a small drop, and that's something that's really good for us because that's a tough age group, as you'd expect. there could be some families wanting to get the kids out of the house that have contributed to that to make sure they get back and playing footy and get them away. But it's a good result for us, and I think across the board those numbers are encouraging for the year that we've had, and put us in a pretty good position to go into next year and recruitment for next year. The next slide we jump into actually looks at the Logan area itself and the list of the clubs there. There's a few standouts in this, and there's some work to be done with Adam and his team about what did they do to actually end up with the results that they ended up with. Because when you consider that, Slacks Creek there with a 30% increase in participation in a year like we've had, it's quite a remarkable thing to see. And there's a couple of clubs there that have all had maybe a slight increase or a large increase, but they're all holding your own or having an increase in this year should be seen as an exceptional result. Also, when you look at retention numbers, across sport, any retention number above 70% is pretty good. And here we've got, in a really tough year, we've got one club in there in Slacks Creek with a retention rate at 75% and another one, Greenbank, with a retention rate of 73%. So they are, for this area, for Logan, they are exceptional results in a very, very difficult year. And hopefully they lead into a good start for 2021. So if we step out of the participation piece and have a look at a little bit about the QRL and what we've done in this period of time. What you've got on the slide there is pretty much a one-page overview of some of our priorities going into 21 and 22. This doesn't replace our strategic plan, it's actually an adjunct to the plan, and these are some things that came out of this COVID year that we needed to focus on into the future. Thinking of a new way of working as an organisation as well. So this one-pager, which is freely available off our website, I'd hope, is just gives a bit of an outline of some of the key priorities, the strategies, and also some of the strategic enablers for us to move forward as a business. I just want to take 1 minute to go through the process we looked at here. So we took the opportunity when COVID came about to we made a decision at a board level that we wanted to come out of this better than we actually went in. So it's a challenge to do that, but it's something that a few businesses have done and probably a lot haven't. But it was one of the things that we made a decision on. This would force us to think differently about how we deliver rugby league within Queensland, and we did that. So the first step for us was to confirm what our role is in the game with the ARL Commission, which we did. The next step was to review our strategic plan, which was mid-term, and tweak it a bit, which we did. From that, we then had focus groups with all of our various work units within the state and presentations from those groups, and from that came the 5 strategic priorities that are listed there, and I'll touch on 2 of them in a minute. We then looked at the strategic enablers that will make that happen. From that, we looked at where the gaps were from the point of view of skills and capability and capacity, and we dealt with that as the resourcing plan for the future. The delivery priorities are there obviously very specifically for our staff to start to look at their own work plan for the future and how they manage that. But also this document itself actually led to what we did with our organisation, our staffing and our delivery into 2021, and we'll touch on that in a minute. But on those strategic priorities there's 2 really key things for us in this discussion today. Capacity, which is the first one, building capacity within our clubs and leagues and everywhere else. For us, that's a joint role, we believe. It's a joint role between us, between local governments and state governments in how we actually do that, because it's an education role and an enabling role that we need to continue into the future. That is a challenge for some of our people because it's a different way of working. We're moving people, refocusing people from doing to actually enabling, and that's going to be a challenge in some areas, but it's the only way forward. We can't expect to have enough staff and continually increase our staff numbers to be able to deliver ourselves for the future. We have to enable our volunteers, our clubs and our partners like council to actually work with us to do that. So that's a big challenge for us, and that's why it's number 1 on the list. Number 2 there I think is the footprint, which is about maintaining a statewide footprint for the game. We have that. We're the only sport that has clubs and the game played in virtually everywhere. I think Arthur will tell me there's 2 LGAs in Queensland where there's no rugby league presence, and I'd say if there's no rugby league presence in those 2 LGAs, there's probably no other sport presence either. So we are statewide, but we do need a statewide footprint. Everyone would know around the table and our guys here that the growth in this area, the growth in Logan, the future growth through the new developments and those sorts of things would lead us to the assumption into the future that there should be an Intrust Super Cup team based in Logan. How we get to that is our challenge collectively, and we'll sort of talk about what we want to get out of this meeting at the end, but that's probably one of our challenges collectively. But there is no doubt that a presence in the statewide programs is something that we should be aiming for this region. I just wanted to then go on and talk a little bit about what we did through this time, because I think I would like you to come away from today having some confidence in our organisation, in our ability to actually work with you as a partner into the future, because we've seen so many organisations and sports particularly that have gone down in this period and will struggle to actually get back up. The board, on our advice, and it was a very, very strong board leadership through this period, made a decision that we wouldn't stand down staff. Obviously, JobKeeper helped everyone out, but we chose to engage with our staff and keep them working for, even if it was 3 days a week or 4 days a week, so there was a few staff on 4, the majority on 3. We used JobKeeper to subsidise it to some extent, but we ensured that we had people working, because we knew that our clubs needed help, they needed support through this period as well, so that if we got up and running, that they would be ready to accommodate the players into the season, and also to prepare them for the next years. And so that was one of the differences, I suppose, in how we actually treated this. The other thing we did as part of that was we reviewed all of our operations, as I just talked about, and planned for the future. The second one on there that happened through this year as well was a review of all of our rep pathways. Once again, South East region has been really proactive in that piece of work. So we had some experts in the field to come in and talk us through the pathways for the future. There will be significant changes to the way things are done, which will challenge parents, will challenge volunteers, but they're the right thing to do. And South East has been trialling some of those over the last couple of years, and they were the first of our 3 regions to actually proactively work on how they will deliver this into the future. There will be some challenges coming forward though, and there will be some people that aren't happy with that their under 12 or under 13 player might not get to play for Queensland. But our view is for that every one of those under 12 or 13 players that plays for Queensland, there's 10 more that have missed that opportunity at that age, and we want to make sure those 10 are still there when they get to under 18, when they get the opportunity to play for Queensland. So that's a big turnaround for us, and it's going to be a challenge for everyone. The wellbeing and education on this thing here is just a really, really simple one. We've got a wellbeing and ed program across the game. We've got 4 employed by ourselves, our own staff. What we did during this period when we knew we needed help internally with our staff, we turned their attention to the staff inside. They work externally with our partners and with our clubs and leagues, and we turned them to work internally, and they provided the support for our staff through this period for the first sort of 4 months, which has been really well received, to the extent that Sport and Rec actually took our Wellbeing Wednesday, which was a video of something for the day to do, and they actually used that for other sports to tap into as well. So that was really good. Diversity, inclusion and the female strategy, 2 key strategy documents that we finalised during this period as well. Good timing. And both of those, as you look at the strategies for the future, are focused clearly in the delivery priorities, the women's framework, the women's strategy and then diversity inclusion framework. Reviewed and created volunteer resources really is about what I talked about before, about supporting the volunteers' engagement and capability in program development. We've done a lot of work on that. Adam's actually leading a group which is doing that as a volunteer engagement strategy going forward, and that piece of work is almost in completion as well. And the last one, in the same period of time, we released our Reconciliation Action Plan, which is clearly picked up in the diversity inclusion piece, but also in the strategies for the future. We maintain an Indigenous Advisory Committee chaired by someone external to our organisation, and that committee were very, very proactive in developing the Reconciliation Action Plan and having it approved. And it was a fairly lengthy process and a convoluted process, but luckily the chair of our committee is fairly closely involved with Reconciliation Australia, and we were able to get that through. And it's a great piece of work for us. The other state bodies in rugby league probably don't have one, and I'm not sure how many other state bodies in sport actually have one. As we move into 2021 for us is actually 1 November this year. That's our year. From the point of view of what we did to prepare for 2021, we had a target of taking 20% of the cost base out of our organisation, which we've done. because a significant piece of our funding actually comes from the NRL, and there was going to be reductions there, so we did it. We did it before anyone else. But out of that, in that 20%, we only took out 10% of the staff, because we recognise we're an organisation that needs people on the ground, to engage and to work with our volunteers and other partners. So we managed to not have as big an impact on our staff as what some organisations have. And we believe that we've restructured the business and the way we do our business to be able to manage that with 10% less, which has been a challenge. One of the other things that is of interest to the group here is a boundaries review that was going on, dealing with the boundaries between Logan, Ipswich and Brisbane. And that review during this COVID period has slowed up a little bit, simply because access to clubs during the time has been difficult. But what the review committee currently is focusing on is doing some work around what's an ideal league look like? What's an ideal governance model? What are the ideal numbers? What are the ideal pathways for players, for coaches, for administrators and so on in those leagues? So they haven't sat still and just said, we'll do it next year. They're actually progressing some work which is going to assist into the future with that review as well. The wellbeing and education, we're going to continue to invest in that area. It's an area where, unfortunately, the cuts at the NRL will impact us, because they will probably focus at the NRL level and not much else in the game, which means we need to rethink how we run our program with our Intra-Super Cup clubs in our 4 regions, how far down into the system we can support, but that's something we're doing. Female strategy is obviously being implemented, and I just wanted to talk the video before had a piece about the first time in 2019 where we had a statewide women's competition. Unfortunately, this year, I think they played 1 game before the seasons were stopped. But luckily and thankfully, with the work of the South East region, the Wholesome Cup got up and running at the back end of the year. We saw fabulous footy, a lot of Origin players in it, and that was a great contribution, a great coordination piece between South East region and the Pathways and Performance Unit at head office to make that happen. So we got the somewhat statewide women's comp away. We supported our Origin players with footy, and then they lead into the NRLW in the next week. So that was a great one for us. It was not easy for Adam and Brad and the team, because considering one of those teams plays at Tweed Heads, and we had to, once the bubble was created with the border across it to Tweed, we actually had to move all of the games out of Brisbane down to the coast so that the Tweed-based women could actually travel to a game. Otherwise, Tweed would have dropped out of the comp. Our other teams accepted that for the sake of the competition and agreed that they would have no home games, that they'd play all their games down the coast. So it was a great result for everyone. We talked a bit about the growing and supporting our volunteer workforce, the work that Adam's doing on that strategy, and also the alignment of Indigenous and cultural carnivals to the framework of diversity and inclusion. There's a great example here in the southeast in the Cupid Carnival, where it's been going on for a while. It's been a carnival that's has been supported by the region in the past, but now it actually has a home. So within that strategy, that type of carnival, the things that we do with Murray carnivals across the central and north Queensland, those types of carnivals now have a home within a strategy for the QRL, which is a great thing. So that's just about it from me talking, and obviously we'd like to take any questions that we can for the time that we've got left, a couple of minutes anyway. But I guess where I'd finish off is a bit like where I started. We've done some things that haven't been done that well. What do we want from here? I suppose from my point of view here is we don't actually have within the state any strategies that are locally based. So we have a state facilities strategy. We have strategies around volunteers and diversity inclusion, all these things which are state-based strategies. We don't have a strategy in a particular LGA. This is a time we need one. So one of the first things that I would hope that we actually achieve from being here today is that jointly, and obviously with some support of state government, we actually can craft a strategy for rugby league in the Logan LGA. And that's, to me, is the outcome we're looking for. It needs to be done reasonably quickly between the parties. It also needs to be done, because we can then at least have a body to take control of the activities that happen within the area. So from the outcome that I'd be looking for is that we agree that that's something we should achieve and work to achieve, and that Adam and his team, on behalf of the whole of the QRL, would be the primary leader in that with council, and that what we would do is use it as an example for other local government areas in Queensland where the same needs could be identified. So thank you for your time today. I think that's, to me, where we would like to get to, and our team here with Adam and his guys are prepared to get into it straight away. And I guess if they're in the last minute or so, if there is any questions.
I've just got one. You guys might have noticed a reporting error we had on one of the slides on the screen. Jim Boomba was an admission from the report.
I did notice that, and I'm sure Councillor Bannon noticed as well.
I assume they would have. The report was run on the Brisbane-based clubs, and obviously Jim Boomba playing in the Gold Coast competition currently, so that was admitted. So if you're playing at home, the numbers for 2019 for them were 425, and this year, as Councillor Bannon would know, is 375 participants this year. So I just wanted to...
Awesome. Thank you. Rob, we will take a few questions if you don't mind. I know there's a few councillors chafing at the bit. I know it'll be welcome news to many that we're looking for a strategy that works across Logan for rugby league. I know you've got a lot of passionate rugby league supporters in Logan, not to mention in this room. So, you know, we would love to have a holistic strategy and working with you guys to roll something out. But if you don't mind, I'm going to take a few questions.
Yeah, no problem at all. That'd be great.
Fantastic. So I'm going to commence with Councillor Jeremiah. Jacob?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, I'd like to thank the QRL for all their great work in our city. I know so many kids in my electorate that have improved their self-confidence and really contributed a lot through programs that you host. So I'd like to just, on behalf of the city, say thank you for that. But also I'd like to bring up from a councillor perspective, there's a few concerns regarding communication with the QRL. Like most of the news I get is from Facebook posts after an announcement has been made. So is QRL able to more proactively communicate with council and councillors?
There's no reason why not. I mean, our digital presence is fairly significant, and also on Facebook, obviously, it is always topical issues. I think that's something that I can take back with Arthur and look at if we can have a structured communique back through all levels of government when announcements and things are made. So that's something that we should be able to put in place relatively easily.
Well, that'd be really good. And another thing is that there's really cost-effective ways to imprint rugby league on kids within our city. So instead of establishing a whole new junior club in new areas like my electorate with development and brand new houses, a more cost-effective solution would actually be increasing investment in programs like Get Into the Game and comps. So has the QRL considered these type of alternatives?
Yeah, I think our aim in those new communities is to look at what's the best fit for the community. If we look at some of the experiences we've had in the past, there's been some really good work done upper in the Redcliffe area where the Redcliffe Club actually created the satellites but ran them for a period of time until they handed them over to a volunteer base that had been built up to that standard. So I think it's a bit horses for courses in certain areas. We've just got to make sure from a community perspective the community gets what they want from it, and we don't start doing things like transposing a team into an area and that sort of stuff. So we've got to actually build from the base up. But I'd hope that our staff are able to assess what the community needs are, work with yourselves to actually create the model that's best in the area.
I appreciate that, and I've noticed that some clubs are over capacity and some clubs are under capacity. So does the QRL cap club numbers?
We don't. It's quite difficult when you start to talk to a club who is over capacity and ask them and explain to them the need to actually have another base. And we've got one right next door, obviously, with 900 odd players. So it's a challenge, but it's very, very difficult to move them along as well. We have access to all the data we need to show the evidence about why you should do it. And when you compare Logan Brothers and Redcliffe with similar numbers, and Redcliffe have got access to 7 fields, that's the difference you're dealing with here. So, but I know the database that we have access to and Adam uses all the time, we can actually do that work. We can run a report on Queensland that says which clubs are over capacity based on the metrics that we use. But do we have a cap? No, not at the moment.
Thanks for the answer. And one more. Can you please send through an electronic version of this PowerPoint presentation with the reports of the club membership to council? That'd be really appreciated.
Yep, will do.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Councillor
Thank you.
Jeremiah, we already have it, so we can forward it across to you. Thank you. Any other questions?
No, that's all from me. Thanks.
Fantastic. Councillor Lane.
So thank you very much for your time today. As the close family member of a young woman who's gone through sport and has achieved the top that she can in footy, I was privileged to watch 3 grand final games on the weekend, or actually 2 grand final games. One, the under-12s were undefeated, the under-14s went down, and the under-16s of Logan brothers were absolutely stunning in their athleticism. My question to you is, what are you doing locally, given the large number of young ladies that are taking up football? What are you doing to encourage them, but also to obtain training grounds and training programs for young women looking to go into football? It's a unique opportunity, but when they reach the top and they're only on 40K a year and have to juggle a full-time job as well as play for the Roosters or whoever it may be, it's a tough road. So what are you doing to encourage that?
You're right, it's a tough road. I talked a little bit before about some of the work that's been happening with the Pathway and Performance Strategy, and the move away from the old style of, representative footy being the pathway. So what we're going to be able to achieve with that is that each age group, in girls and boys, men and women, in each region, we can access more and more players, because it's not based on actually winning a game for the region, it's based on player development. So I'll get Adam to give me the right numbers, but in each region, in each of the age groups for boys and girls, men and women, there would be access to number of players.
Totally?
Yeah, I'll
check those for you, or I don't have them with me.
Yeah, okay, that's right. I think if you consider that if you only use 20 players, if you work a representative-based model, if we can provide the same input to those players and there's 80 instead of 20, then by the time we actually get to the point where the players are coming through the pathways into representative sides at an older age, we've actually had a broader base. So that's what we're planning to do starting 2021. And each of the regions is just working that out at the moment, what that looks like.
Thanks for that. Just a heads up, the trophy day for the women for Logan Brothers is the 24th of October. You're more than welcome to send down some people to support them.
We'll note that, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you so much. I had a very similar question to Councillor Jeremiah in relation to capacity, and I've got 2 rugby leagues in the area I represent, and there are a couple of hundred players in each. Is there do you have a figure for what makes a club financially viable and sustainable going out into the future? Because obviously there are needs and wants and whatever of clubs, and if a couple of hundred players for each, it's just makes it very hard in relation to resources. So do you have an ideal capacity number?
The data that we use to look at capacity is worked off 150 per field. I think Arthur will be able to check if I'm right. Tell me if I'm right. I think it's 150 per field.
We work off 100. Most councils work off 200.
Yeah. So, and the reason it's done at that point is that for one field, that's to be able to provide training and competition through the week and onto the weekend without having to go and overstress volunteers and run extraordinary hours and all those sorts of things. When you look at those sorts of numbers, what we use in our database and what would come up as those over capacity, there'll be quite a few in the state over capacity. Yeah. From the point of view of financial viability of clubs, it's a critical thing for us. It goes from a junior club, small junior club, all the way through to an intra-super cup club. It also goes into the NRL clubs. You'll see the data that comes out of the NRL about the number of clubs that would go broke if they didn't support them and all that. The game can't support all the clubs with money. We have to support them somehow else, which is more sustainable. Our view, and Adam's view, and the team that he's working on the engaging volunteers is one of the key parts of that. is the better educated, more volunteers with more capacity would assist in making sure that our clubs remain viable as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bannon.
Thanks, and through the chair, with a couple for you, mate. With the boundary review, would you be looking at doing a western corridor, like with Mustangs and Brothers and Browns Plains, Bean League, that sort of thing? Because obviously you've got Brisbane and Gold Coast comp.
Yeah,
Brisbane's got a lot of clubs, a lot more clubs than the Gold Coast have. Is that something you'd look to have, that western corridor?
Yeah, the boundary review itself had no preconceived idea of what it may come up with. It was looked at because we understood the growth in this area and also the close relationship between the other LGAs. So there was no preconceived idea. We didn't get to a point of even coming up with any sort of modelling for the future because the difficulty we had was in consultation with clubs when they went back to play. Their whole focus was on return to play, so we couldn't actually have the consultation we needed. So we've pushed that piece into the beginning of next year. But the committee, as I said before, have focused themselves on what would make an ideal league. And we're doing some research as well into other states and areas about what theirs look like, bearing in mind the governance models in local league in New South Wales are completely different to ours. Where in the Sydney area particularly, they're run by the NRL clubs themselves, which is a completely foreign model to us. So, yeah, the committee didn't get to the point of looking at what the future may look like, but what we said at the beginning of the committee is nothing's off the table. But there was no preconceived view of what it may look like in the end, and we hope that we will get through that in the first part of next year.
Because you think, would it come down, through the chair, would it come down to travel, obviously? Like, you got kids from, Mustangs that'll drive all up to the north side of Brizzy. Like, is that something the QRL will take on board? And I know with the club that I'm involved with, we're Gold Coast, but last year we were going to actually transfer and go into the Brisbane comp. So even the board, as you said, they're not set, are they? So a club can transfer from one league to a different if the committee decides on it?
Yeah, that was one of the key questions in the consultation. We did get some data back, and it was quite interesting as to how far people would travel, both for training and competition. It's a bugbear of mine to see kids travel across Brisbane to play footy, and it's one of those things at the moment it's hard to control. But the piece of work we're doing around what makes the ideal league takes into account travel times and things like that. You can do that in the southeast. You can't do that once we go north and west, because obviously travel times just become part of life. And we're in Western Queensland and Northwest Queensland, where teams will travel for 5 hours, play a game, and then go home. That's just normal practice for them. Obviously, no one in the southeast will do that, and we have the capacity in the southeast with the numbers that we have to actually, come up with some of the data like that says this is how far you should be travelling.
Would you look at putting, through the chair, some through BRL or Gold Coast Rugby League to stop? Like when you got super clubs like Brothers with 900 kids there, and I know they're stacking the sides pretty heavily. I know, and we always got told after under 12, once you made rep, you got points and you couldn't transfer to certain clubs. But I've got Div 1 kids that transfer into Brothers because they think you have to go there to make a rep side.
Yeah.
So would you enforce the boundaries a little bit harder down the track, that if you should stay in that catchment area and not have every kid transfers to Brothers? I know Mustangs, Sunnybank, Browns Plains, like across the board, are losing kids to Brothers every week.
Yep. In an ideal world, you could start from scratch and do that. You could actually allocate your catchment areas against either local government boundaries or some other boundary that you want to make. You could have it so that it leads directly into intra-super cups and all that sort of stuff. We don't have a perfect world, unfortunately, in relation to that. So we've got different boundaries that have been historical. We've got clubs with different footprints and their own catchments are different. At the moment, in the terms of reference for the review, it's clearly in there about stacking teams, winning premierships and those sorts of things. It's clearly in the terms of reference of the review, but we haven't come to any conclusion about it.
Just probably add one thing quickly, sorry, Councillor Bannon, just that we've got a 2021 rule review happening at the moment on transfer specifically, around a 5 and 2 rule, and also then local leagues putting in their own point systems. So Brisbane does have one at the moment, and they're being looked at for each other league at the moment.
I think the big problem through the chair is that you got school-based rep football. So I coach Vikings and the Gold Coast rep system down there. So we're talking about dropping Vikings for under 14s, which you guys would be aware of. And I think the school systems are talking about picking it up and have a Queensland side through the school system at 14. And so a lot of the Clubland, they're not really acknowledging rep players from school football teams. And obviously when they play in school together, that's when kids are your best, recruitment officer when they get the kids from their rep sides. So I guess we're losing a lot of kids because they are rep players, it's just that the club haven't acknowledged them. And because we dropped 13 Vikings and 14 Vikings and we keep dropping it back, that 07 age group, we are losing a lot of kids at different clubs that are, you know, legitimate Queensland football players. But so I don't know, do we start to acknowledge, does the QRL acknowledge the school-based system a little bit more, or just thinking out loud?
Oh, there's no doubt at all that the schools have a significant impact on what happens in the pathways for players. They're a pretty tight catchment in their own right because of how they operate and where they are. You've got some, you've got some schools down here that are significant players in that pathway as well. We've got to accept that we have to work with the school system on how we actually do this. One of the things that we're really conscious about is that we don't want to overload kids. And as much as possible, when we meet with the schools and look at our calendars for the year and all those sorts of things, we attempt to do that. But unfortunately, individual schools can do what they want in some respects, and it's difficult sometimes to keep them in line, and we can't do it. So I think the best we can do is make sure that we've got some clear air for the schools in certain age groups and make sure we focus on that and support that, but also engage with the schools to make sure they do the same for us, in the other years as well.
Do you think you could put the school-based rep players on the point system?
I can grab that one if you like, Rob. There is a privacy issue that we've faced with Queensland School Sport with sharing the data currently. So that's been an issue why the point system was taken away from school rep players. It's something that is certainly part of the discussion. And also I'll just add that it's never been healthier, our discussion with the school system in terms of playing windows for competitions. But their representative programs being where they are, as you referenced earlier, is a national discussion that we have to have. So that's going to take us a little longer to try and, break down some walls there. So we're working on that at the moment through the Performance and Pathways review that Rob mentioned earlier.
Nothing further, Councillor Bannon?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilcox?
Thank you. Just wondering, with the figures that you gave for how many kids are playing in those clubs and that sort of thing, could you go back as far and provide us figures for 2018 and 2019? Because I'd like to see the retention rates of those years and just to see how many kids are actually starting to drop off.
Yeah, we can do that. Adam will be able to sort that out. I think we can probably go back 5 years.
I think 17 is probably our cleanest data.
Yeah.
17 and through we can...
Yep, that'd be good so that we can sort of see it.
There was a shift in the database we used at that time. So we wouldn't guarantee the data before that date. And the beauty of what's going on at the moment is the data, the system we use is actually going to be brought in-house for the whole of game at the ARL level. So it's not going to be outsourced to a third party any longer, so it'll be back in-house, which will be great because we can finally get the reports that we really want.
Mm-hmm. And then I agree with the boundary review and that sort of thing. I think you need a Logan comp. For me, you had enough teams on that screen for the juniors up to, under 12s, 13s, whatever, for them to have a comp in their own backyard, basically. Yep. For me, there was enough teams in there that they play each other twice through the season, and then you have your finals at the end. I don't personally see a need as to why teams are travelling an hour across the city to go and play someone else when you can clearly see there's enough teams here in Logan.
You may be right, and that may be an outcome that comes out of it, but we were very careful not to jump to any conclusions at the beginning. And as we collect the data, and your views on those sorts of things are really critical to that as well.
Because the other thing that you could potentially do is you could have, like a whole competition based in Logan. You can have a competition in Ipswich. You can have a competition in Brisbane. You can have a competition in Gold Coast. You'll have a winner from each region. Play them off against each other at the end, so the season doesn't finish when you get to the end. You then have regional winners, then make them state winners and stuff like that. Like, for me, that's a healthy competition.
Yep. Don't disagree with that. We'll actually use that as part of the consultation now. Thank you.
Excellent.
City of origin.
Coming from a HPE teacher. My other query is in relation to school sport, because I know schools are starting to say, you can't play local footy, so I'm worried about them taking those kids away with the retention rates and stuff like that. Now, my daughter's a swimmer. She can't get through Queensland School Sport swimming because she's now playing in Met East. She could in Met West, couldn't in Met East, so it's driving me bonkers. But she can via normal club swimming and that sort of thing. She can make states. So my only question to you is, with these kids that they're saying, no, you can't play anywhere bar school footy, is to say, well, hey, if you're playing school footy, you play school footy. You know, you're not going to come through the club ranks then, and you're not going to get picked up that way. Maybe that's a way out of it, so that they can't just say, so you've got Keebra, Marsden, I don't even know where else. PBC, Mabel, you know, those ones that have got those excellence programs and stuff like that, great. There's only like maybe one player that's ever going to come out and make it to those grades. To keep it healthy and that sort of thing. So if you're playing school footy, great. But if you want to get picked up by these other clubs, don't expect to unless you're playing club footy. Just
unfortunately, the schools of excellence, as they call themselves, are a bit of a law unto their own.
Yeah.
They are supported heavily by the NRL clubs. They are a convenient place to recruit and retain and keep players. But I think, as Adam said, the relationship we have with the schools, and particularly with the state rugby league group in schools, is probably the best we've ever been. So we can have some of those discussions. If I put my parents' hat on, kids have gone through the same thing. As a parent, I would accept that you don't want them to be playing 2 games a weekend and doing all those sorts of things. You'd want them to be doing their school studies and socialising and doing other normal stuff as a kid. So I had no issue with a son that played half a season of rugby union and half a season of rugby league, because at the end of the day, we've got to bank on our game is the one that they will prefer to play at the end of it. I think it's really critical that our relationship with the school system is good enough that we can actually identify and retain those players in those programs, because they change from year to year anyway.
Yeah.
And the work that's being done around the pathways and performance strategy, it's not going to look at those school-based players and go, well, you're excluded because you're at school, you're not at a club. It's actually looking at the base of players that have been identified in the area.
Yeah.
So it won't leave them out because of where they are, but it also wouldn't give them any favour either. It would be based on the players in the region.
Just I'm just thinking, when you're involved in club sport and that sort of thing. Personally, I wouldn't send my kids to go and play footy at Logan Brothers because they're going to, just hear me out, because they're going to stack their teams, they've got all the good players. I would rather have my kid playing in some other club that's got 300 kids where they're going to absolutely shine, and then, if selectors are around, they're not looking for 20 that are pretty much the same sort of player on a field. They're going to look over here and they're going to see my child playing in a team of 20 that absolutely shines.
So, Councillor Wilcox, that's a statement. Is there a question in there?
No, not really. Not for that one.
It's it's a common statement.
Councillors, I'm cognizant of the time. I'm going to indulge Councillor Bannon, Councillor Lane, Councillor Hall, and finish with Councillor Raven, and there'll be no further questions. Councillor Lane, you actually had a response in relation to Councillor Wilcox's comments, is that right?
Yes.
Keep it tight.
So let's be really clear. Logan Brothers do not stack their teams. They are an inclusive club that actually encourages participation, particularly of young males and young females in sport. They are supportive. If people want to go and play because it's a great club, that is not stacking a club.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. As I said, we have some passionate rugby league supporters here in the room. Councillor Bannon.
And through the chair, I've got plenty to say to Theresa Lane after about others, but there is the one part, and as I know better than anyone, it comes down to usually the parents that take them to the club, because the parents think they're going to be the next Cam Smith. Yeah. The one thing I am a bit of a supporter of the school comp, because we have a lot of trouble kids in our club, and the one thing that school have over clubland is they can control their grades and their attendance. So there is good things in the excellence programs. But I've just quick, the only reason I put the thing is I'm glad you mentioned it, because when we had the Prem comp here, we always wished, I know it's hard with the different comps, but to have Gold Coast play the Prems at Brisbane and North Coast would be a great super day, especially with those international teams on a competition day. That would be good for the game, to bring the state together to see who's, our Div 1 boys as good as the Brisbane Prem boys and right through up. I think that would be sensational. Thank you for indulging me, Madam Chair.
My pleasure. Councillor Hall.
this is a bit of a statement and probably a bit of a plug as well. If you want to see an example of an amazing club, you don't need to look no further than the Waterford Demons. This club survives.
Councillor Hall, what did you say at the beginning? I didn't quite catch it.
I said if you want to hear a statement and a bit of a plug.
A bit of a plug, thank you.
Okay.
I'll
What
turn
I was
up my
saying
hearing
is, before I was interrupted, was if you want to see an example of an amazing club, you look no further than the Waterford Demons, because here you have a club which survives on the passion of its members. It's working within an ageing facility, which really needs to be upgraded as soon as possible, which, you know, I'm working hard to make happen, as well as some of the other councillors with me and some of our state members. But really you'll find that a club like this, it's got about 1,000 members, survives on the passion of its members and the people who are passionate about the game. Now, this talk about putting up boundaries as to where players can go and whatnot, I don't think that's right, because athletes need to go where they can shine. And sometimes they need to go to certain clubs to be seen. And, you know, by limiting that, you're taking away their opportunity to be seen, to be picked up by even greater teams, and to be ambassadors for Logan. Because I love it when I see rugby players that come from Logan, no matter where they play.
Awesome, and I know the Waterford Demons is a fine club, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new clubhouse roll out in due course. Councillor Raven, I'm going to actually leave it to you to round out the debate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your indulgence. Rob, I was really excited when you said you wanted to run a bit of a pilot with LGA boundaries. You want to do it in Logan. That sounds like a fantastic opportunity for our city, because something that often gets overlooked is that council is one of your key funding partners when it comes to supporting your local clubs. Demons is a fantastic example. We've got $500,000 from the state government committed to upgrading their facilities, which have been condemned for the better part of a decade. And council is thumping up the $1.3 million for the rest of it. And that will continue to roll out across the city as other clubs require their facilities to be replaced and upgraded. And a prime example is also Logan Brothers, who continually go and get in the game grant funding and that sort of thing from the state, but ultimately council always puts our hand in our pocket, and same thing happens out at Beenleigh as well. Council puts our hand in our pocket to either co-contribute, to match, or to exceed what we get from other levels of government. And with that in mind, I'd like to ask that we're actually engaged as your key partner when you're going to do this work with the LGA boundary review. I think it'd be great to be able to talk to Adam moving forward and fire some ideas around, because at the moment we've got clubs like East coming into a city that has a club called Logan Souths that should really have dibs on all of the kids in Logan, purely by the name and the pride that comes with having a club named after your city, rather than having a wealthy club that's got pokie machines coming in and trying to poach that talent, when ultimately the local club with the local name that can unite the city around it should really be able to have those kids. And if they do transfer to East or Wynnum, Manly, wherever else they happen to go, and then they get their transfer fees, and a club that is struggling financially compared to places that have pokey palaces and leagues clubs and all that sort of thing, they can actually get those benefits from the talent that is born in Logan and trained in Logan and found in Logan, and then may find another pathway into the NRL or the QRL. So I'd really welcome an opportunity to engage closely with you. I want to thank you for coming here today and giving us the information you have. I was actually going to hit you up about making a boundary around Logan anyway, and you thought it was a good idea before I even opened my mouth. So clearly we're on the same page, and I know there's probably a number of councillors who would welcome the opportunity to engage closely. I know Councillor Karansky is the chair that has portfolio over this sort of stuff, would be keen, but as the Deputy Mayor I'd be very interested as well.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Just a couple of responses to that. The role of local government in support of clubs through facilities and other things is not something that's lost on us. I think we are the only sport who actually take a booth at the LGAQ conference every year, and I think that's a testament to Arthur and the others in the regions about how we value the role of local government in our sport. And there should be far more sports there talking to their local government representatives while they're there. So I think we acknowledge that. We also acknowledge that we will never have the funding for a game that you have, and that we obviously have to be key partners going forward. And that was really I guess, the start and finish of the discussion today about why we're here and what we like to see in the future. Adam, Brad and Brian and anyone else on their board of delegates is going to be open to any conversations that you want to have about anything in your city, and that they will take charge of this strategy going forward on behalf of the whole of the QRL, because it really is a local strategy that needs to be supported by the region and by yourselves. So we would hope that that's something that we can achieve shortly.
Fantastic. Look forward to it.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So just in conclusion, and I'd just like to say a very warm thank you to you and Adam, Arthur, Brad, Brian and the QRL for putting together this presentation for councillors today. Certainly takeaway message for me is that there's an appetite to collaborate and work together. And I'm certainly interested in looking at how we potentially can provide some consultation around boundary review as well. Please continue conversations with Nigel and so on how we move forward. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening across the city, and we've got some very big growth areas, as you rightly said. So, councillors, I think that we'll leave it there today. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You can just take a quick stretch if you like, councillors.
The presidential election's happening now, the presidential election debate.
Yeah.
Reading it. Trump repeatedly mocked Biden,
Big day for that.
suggesting the Democratic nominee's comments on healthcare cost him support among progressives. Biden responded by calling Trump a liar and a clown. When Trump interrupted another one of Biden's answers, the Democrat said, "Shut up, man." When Chris Wallace pressed Trump on his philosophy plan, the president told the moderator, "I guess I'm not debating you. I guess I'm debating you, not him. That's okay, I'm not surprised." Biden responded by forcefully laughing. So funny.
All right, councillors, if you could please return to your seats, that would be great.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right,
Tim's up
thank
the
you
back.
for the heads up, Tim. Thank you, Tim.
You need to get it wrapped up by 11:25, otherwise we're going to come back.
I can't turn back time, Mr Mayor. It's 11:32. Did you say 11:25?
11:25.
It's 11:32 now.
Oh, no. Sorry. 12:25. Yeah, I know.
Fire up the DeLorean, Mr Mayor. All right, councillors, are we all back in place? Thank you, everyone, for your participation. You'll actually find there is a motion on the board ahead of you to forward a vote of thanks onto our representatives from Queensland Rugby League. Can I have someone to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is unanimous, noting Councillor Bannon and Councillor Wilcox are out of the room. Awesome. Okay, moving forward, I'm mindful that we actually have a tight schedule today, councillors, and the Mayor has just reminded me that we've got the annual report coming up soon, so we'll keep motoring along. I now draw your attention to item 5.2, which is on page 51 of your agenda. Before we open discussion on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare with regard to the Active Logan strategy update on the recreation trails strategy? There being none, I'll now defer to the manager, Nigel, to provide us with an update on this report.
Thank you, through the chair. So this report has come about as a result of the general business item from the 29th of August, looking at developing a mountain bike strategy for the City of Logan, specifically addressing tourism and trail maintenance issues. The report, I guess in some respects, brings in work that had already been undertaken and resolved by Council under the Active Logan strategy, and identifying that the number one action under the implementation plan was to develop a strategy looking at recreation trails, taking into consideration that the recreation trails are multi-use trails across the city, and bringing into that discussion the work that is already in place with a task group made up of a number of different branches across council that have important roles and responsibilities in that place. So the report goes into detail around some of the history around previous rec trail strategy from 2010 to 2020, and also just provides some definition around the fact that we are talking about non-motorised trail-based activities, walking, bushwalking, trail running, obviously orienteering, mountain biking, horseback riding. So there's a whole network of trails which are multi-use, which is, we wanted to ensure that councillors were aware of the work that was happening in that space and how that does bring in the important element of mountain biking and the tourism potential that includes. The report then talks about the development of that strategy and where that is at under the implementation plan of the Active Logan strategy, so just to bring councillors up to speed with that process. It also talks about the scope of that current piece of work, and importantly the important element of maintaining and managing the existing network of trails, which is obviously a current challenge. And that was really reflected in the 2019 work that the Parks branch did when they developed the Logan City Council Parks Mountain Bike and Walking Trail Operational Plan. So that goes into detail following an audit of those particular areas. That data is really critical to this, to bring into that, and in particular the more urgent and immediate work that's needed to be done in that maintenance and upgrade of trails to ensure that we can meet those requirements. I guess the reality is that some of our areas across the city are being loved to death, I think was a quote that was used in a briefing yesterday. There's increased demand, and if I'm quoting Councillor Bradley's discussion, there's overuse, its impact on environment, and the opportunity to capitalise on visitors to accessing. So we are certainly focused on all of those elements, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Do I have any questions? Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Nigel. So a quick check of Visit Brisbane for places to go for mountain biking. In Logan it says Cornubia State Forest, Underwood Park, Daisy Hill Forest. So it lists all three straight up off the bat. One thing that I've noticed I live on the back of Karawatha Forest, obviously a Brisbane forest, is that cyclists are making their new trails through the forest. They don't have a lot of regard or respect for the forest and the existing trails that are there. I think that there's some major problems that are occurring with mountain bike riders. While I respect their sport, I think we do need to look at opportunities for them to challenge themselves. There's multiple programs throughout the state where they have specific logs that they ride along and physically challenge them without them tearing apart state forests and environmentally sensitive areas. Is that part of this proposal, and is it also limiting mountain bike riding in our local state forests as well? We talk about the tourism dollars, sorry, but to my mind they come in, they put their bikes on the trail, they chew it up and then they go home.
So thank you through the chair. So it's a really good point that you raise, and the management and I guess control of mountain bike activities is largely undertaken through our Parks branch and in managing those open space trails. You're absolutely correct. Where the degradation occurs, it's not necessarily the club-based mountain bike organisations that are quite respectful of the environment and the impacts, and their desire not to see that degraded. It's often the individual users who will just go rogue, and it's about how that gets managed with our park rangers and community feedback in that space. So, and education is an element. So that will certainly be considered in all of these aspects. And as we said, while mountain biking is a part of that, we have a similar issue with horseback riding and the impacts that horses have on trails as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Nigel, I've got to be honest, I'm lukewarm on the mountain bike trails. I understand there might be a little bit of tourism involved, but I think it's more or less they come here, they ride their bikes and they go home again. I'm very interested, obviously, in the rail trails type of activity because this is about getting people that aren't into fitness, that aren't really catered for, and we really need to encourage because there's going to be an ongoing health concern with obesity, or continues to be. And I really want to see that activated and concentrated on. And I believe that if we do have a proper rail trail network in our city, that we can also provide tourism activity there, shops, so that people can pick up their food or their drinks or whatever. But it also mainly encouraging Logan residents to really activate themselves and get involved. And it's at a lower level so that, little kids can get involved, whereas mountain trail bikes are generally for the fit people, and they're already catered for. They're not an issue that I think that we really need to cover. And we have only got a certain amount of funding. I really think we should concentrate on where we need our deficiencies as a society, really, and encourage people to get involved.
Mr Mayor, do you have a question or is that just a statement?
Sorry?
Do you have a question for Nigel in there? It's just a statement. And I did ask Nigel earlier in the week if rail trails and so on would be integrated in as part of the ongoing work of this body of work. Nigel, would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. So just a couple of points. The impact of mountain biking and the opportunity through tourism is certainly quite significant, particularly with the visiting friends and neighbours, or friends and relatives market. And it was identified in the Logan Destination Management Plan as an opportunity which I think we definitely want to capitalise on. ED&S are part of the working group and will be continuing to support that. But again, not only for mountain biking, but the whole range of other trail users. The rail trail is certainly a significant element of that, and again, ED&S are key involvement in that to ensure that that's captured in the process.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess from my perspective, I was really excited when Councillor Bradley brought this up because obviously my community is obviously very focused on mountain biking as well, and they'd come to me when I was first elected regarding this. I guess what concerns me, obviously this recreation trail strategy needs to be renewed and needs, moving forward for the next 10 years as done previously. But I'm a bit concerned that some of the issues being faced in relation to the mountain biking and the tracks, etc. in our area are going to get lost in this strategy. I feel like it needs to be more focused because of what's happened during COVID, because of the increased demand specifically for mountain biking. There's concerns over looking at the recent audit, that there's concerns that there's some maintenance issues that really need to be dealt with, from the environmental perspective, but also for the safety perspective, and for the excess use. And like you said, it is a tourism thing. It's fantastic to see so many people coming in and using the trails, but it is concerning to me that it's going to get lost in this strategy. That's why I was kind of pleased. I was hoping that we would see more of a detailed and focused mountain biking strategy.
Nigel, do you have a
comment?
comment?
I will comment if I may, because I think it's a really good point that is made, that there is a risk with strategies that they become longer term focuses, but the reality is there's things that need to be done now, and I guess taking on board feedback from councillors recently and be guided by you in that respect. But I think the fact that the Parks branch have identified that operational plan in 2019 and identified some immediate needs that need to be looked at, that really comes back down to funding in the shorter term rather than waiting for a strategy to be fully endorsed and developed. It's about working in that space concurrently and ensuring that there's a resourcing available to enable that branch that is responsible for that element to continue to not only maintain but to expand and increase accessibility. So that would be something certainly I'd be guided by.
Councillor Bradley, I note your animated response. Is that with regard to Councillor Stemp's comment, or I have two other councillors ahead of you? You wait your turn. Fantastic. Could I please have Councillor Bannon?
Thank you. And through the chair, I love the strategy. I think it's great. Like, the mountain biking, that's what it does. I know Mayor was saying about the rail trail, but this is what gets people out to do things. This does it. I've got friends that are 30, 40 kilos overweight and are starting mountain biking now. They're not fit guys. I mountain bike, I'm not a fit guy. We pack our Daisy Hill or we go to Nerang. Like myself and Councillor Jeremiah, we've got Fless's Reserves, Jerry's Downfall. And it's great timing because I've got the amount of emails and phone calls and meetings I've had about people asking for walking and mountain bike trails through these areas is massive. From a fireys point of view, because obviously I'm a fiery, I love the extra access to it. It opens it up. It's a safety issue. I know from talking to the rangers, they like people going through there to see if anything's happening or something's gone wrong with the extra use. It's good for the environment because you stick on one trail instead of having numerous trails where people get lost or can get hurt. Like, I just think it's great that we're doing the strategy, and I couldn't be more excited about hopefully getting some for myself and Councillor Jeremiah into our divisions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bannon. Councillor Hall.
Pretty much any path or track that council puts down is something that the ratepayers of Logan have to maintain and have to pay for it to be maintained. So essentially here we're paying, our ratepayers are paying for paths which will be utilised by tourists who possibly aren't even residents. I understand the sentiment from Councillor Bannon in terms of people getting fit and active, but I think you'll find that a lot of these trails will be misused, because if we can't keep the Pee-wee 50s off our hooning around our streets, I don't think it's going to be a good situation seeing park rangers chasing Pee-wee 50s on push bikes up these mountain trails, which is most likely going to occur, adding additional resources onto our police to go out and find these little hoons running around, not to mention the detrimental effect to the wildlife that has nowhere else to go, has to, you know, they live in these areas, they have nowhere else to go, their places are taken up by development, these are their areas, and once again, we're putting paths, we're putting roads through their areas with no consideration towards the impacts of their life. They don't have a voice. They can't say, we don't want a rail trail. So people have to stand up and speak for them. And that's what I'm doing here right now.
Champion of wildlife.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. And actually, Councillor Stamp would just like to provide a response to that, and I'll allow it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, look, I've got to know the volunteers in our area, and honestly, they're the ones that maintain our trails. It's not the ratepayer, it's them, and they do an incredible job, and they do need extra support. They're very respectful. I know the mountain bike guy that I've met, they're extremely respectful of the environment. They're extremely respectful of the wildlife. They're closing up trails that have been made by people recklessly. They really are. They're a good group of people, and they really are. It's not, yeah, there's people doing the wrong thing, but there's a good majority of people doing the right thing as well.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. I'll now go to Councillor Bradley.
Thank you so much. Nigel, may I ask, on page 55, the council resolution that the Sports Leisure Facilities Manager, in conjunction with their economic development and strategy, etc., prepare a report for the City Lifestyle Committee, being today, considering the development of a mountain bike strategy for the City of Logan, specifically to address tourism and maintenance of trails. My question to you, does this report actually address that?
So through the chair, my role as Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager is to bring all of the information back to Council to make a decision. So the fact that our Active Logan strategy and the implementation plan had already identified a piece of work around recreation trails incorporating all of the multiple users, I felt it was appropriate to bring that back to Council for their awareness that that is the piece of work, and that to do a strategy that was in isolation from those other user groups within those trails, I think would not be appropriate. And I think that in that sense, I feel that I've done the appropriate.
Okay, it was specifically asked for a mountain bike strategy. There are issues. Everyone has mentioned all those issues here today. There are issues. There's been an audit done of our mountain biking trails. You read that audit, it's not public, you read it, it's disgusting. This has been brought to Council's attention. our mountain bike trails are causing issues in the environment. They're degraded. There's trails everywhere. It's not being addressed. And that was the purpose of asking for a mountain biking strategy, not to look at the bigger picture. If we leave it for this to go ahead, we'll have nothing left. We'll have nothing left in Underwood Park, in all the other parks where there is mountain bikers, Neville Lowry Reserve, in Spring Mountain and Cornubia. We'll have nothing left. That's why I specifically asked for a report about a strategy for mountain bikers. Not a bigger picture thing for everything else and a rail trail that has never been supported by a previous council. And I understand that the chair is very supportive of it and that has been bringing it forward and started to bring it forward last term. I understand that, but previously we have never supported it. So I am really concerned, and I'm going to ask that this be deferred because it is not what was asked for.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I am aware that I have Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Harrimeyer, but Councillor Raven, did you actually want to respond? Did you want to make a comment with regard to Councillor Bradley's comments? Okay.
That's
I'll allow.
specifically because it's the same line of questioning for Nigel. Thank you for your indulgence, Madam Chair. When the general business item was raised, I did flag that a strategy might end up in this place because strategy is often bigger than Ben-Hur. On page 54, where it talks about the Logan City Council Parks mountain bike and walking trail operation plan, is that not where the maintenance work that Councillor Bradley and Councillor Stemp are expecting a specific focus on mountain biking should be? Should that plan not meet their needs specifically around making sure that the trails are maintained well, that the ones that aren't meant to be there because they're brought in by people that aren't club related, isn't that where that belongs? And if it's properly funded, shouldn't that deliver the outcomes that Councillors Bradley and Stemp are aiming for?
So through the chair, certainly my discussions with the parks manager support that is the case. That piece of work was the operational maintenance and resourcing requirements that parks need to undertake exactly that piece of work to immediately and continually address those issues. So that is correct. It's through the parks.
So I guess then that begs the question, why isn't it happening? Because clearly from Councillor Bradley and Councillor Stent's comments and questions, there are maintenance issues on those BMX tracks that aren't being addressed. So does the plan not go far enough? Is it not specific enough? Is there not enough funding attributed to it to make sure that it can keep up with the use?
Could I just jump in there? I'm not sure if Nigel's the best person to actually answer this question. We don't have the parks.
Through the chair, that's correct. But I am aware that the implementation plan in that space is aiming at addressing it. The resourcing is the issue. In that their level of support to those volunteer groups is largely about providing materials to support those volunteer groups to do that to the best that they can. But there is a much larger gap.
Okay, cool. So to address that, we'd have to have some kind of budget strategy referral. Thank you.
Mr Mayor, is that with regard to, you're wanting to speak with regard to what Councillor Bradley raised or another issue?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to state that I was taken by surprise with the wording on this. I actually thought that Councillor Bradley supported the mountain bike trails and to widen the program and to kick it off. That's why I said that I'd rather go down the other avenue of addressing trails for average punters out there, the rail trails and that type of thing. I must say though that the way the GB item come up, I could understand where the officers have misinterpreted it, because I did myself. I was a little bit perturbed with Councillor Bradley because I thought she was more encouraging more to happen. I'm with Councillor Bradley on this. I actually feel that we're letting our major environmental areas be degraded too much. I think we should reduce or maybe stabilise what they've currently got and not increase the trails, because once the trail goes in, you have degradation following and up, particularly after large rain, and there'll be an ever-going problem forever and more. And I think there's enough there already.
There's none in our area.
Okay, I'm actually coming around to Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Jeremiah, but you want to speak with regard to the Mayor's comments, Councillor Bennett. Please, with your indulgence, Councillor Bannon.
We haven't got too many. We haven't got any in the whole part of where we are. We haven't got any. We have to go to Daisy Hill or Nerang to use them. The fact is, people are already making their own trails. There's trails everywhere, and what Councillor Bradley, I hope I'm right, Councillor Bradley, through the chair, that at the moment it's chaos. There's people everywhere. The strategy, if people read this, I shouldn't say that. The way I read it is we address it. The team has addressed it all due to overuse of trail, due to lack of maintenance, cost to deliver and maintain, increased pressure on conservation areas, competition. They've done their job. They've addressed every single concern that we had in this thing, and they're the concerns that I had. Like, I know it's chaos in there. Like, I'm the only one in the room that's a fire that has to go in there and put the fires in there. The more access stuff we get, the better. At the moment, there's trails going everywhere. Kids are getting hurt. You can't find them. This takes us from a roadmap of chaos to a proper used trail that we can maintain and make sure the environmental stuff's done. Like, as much as I go in to do the fires, Councillor Stemp's the only one in there with a shovel helping. You can see that she's there all the time in those trials helping. I don't know how often you ride them, but I ride them a lot. I don't see the environment getting hammered in it. So we're doing this will be better for the environment than letting people do whatever they want and free. Councillor Jeremiah, Councillor Karansky and myself, we haven't got any. And I've got people begging me to put these trails in. And that's the fireys as well as the people that ride the push bikes. So that's why I support this. And I'm confused too. Sorry, Councillor Bradley, I thought this is kind of what you wanted. But like I said before, I think you've done your job.
And I'm going to move on, but before I do, I'm going to say that I don't necessarily see that the two are mutually exclusive. I think the strategy is a strategy for the whole city, and Councillor Bradley's raised some specific concerns about, and I think the comment was loving a certain area of the city to death that needs some specialised attention. Can I just ask you, Nigel, those areas of concern that Councillor Bradley raised, just to be clear, because I know Councillor Raven raised it as well, the intent is to pick up those concerns and to address those concerns, and we need to work with our Parks Department to enable that to occur. And if I heard correctly, there's a funding issue. Is that right?
That is through the chair. That is correct. But I think that the gap that has been identified in the report is that it doesn't deal with that immediate need. So the concern would be that a strategy takes time to develop. There's lots of engagement, consultation, but in the meantime, there are things that are happening now. And so I'd reflect back on where parks are at with their planning around the maintenance requirements and the audit that was undertaken. And I think to address that, there may be an opportunity for an additional recommendation in this report to seek the finance manager, for example, to put this onto the future budgets register to look to provide additional funding to support the mountain bike trail maintenance activities. I'd need wording from the parks.
Would you prefer to deal with that as an independent recommendation?
Guided by yourselves in that regard.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Wilcox, Councillor Jeremiah. So, Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Through the chair. I actually thought when this was going to come up, it was going to be a separate mountain biking trails strategy, not part of the recreational trails strategy. Is it something that we can move forward and we can start to progress? Because I was just looking on the Brisbane City Council website and the Gap Creek Mount Cootha Trails stuff, and what they've got is awesome, but we don't seem to have that. We don't seem to have maps about where it is, literally until you get there. I didn't even know Daisy Hill Forest. I didn't know that they had mountain biking trails. And I know that I've been asked, and I'm trying to get it started, and I think it has started, mountain biking trails up in Spring Mountain Forest Park, because as a crow flies, from that trail ride to the back of Ipswich is probably only about 2 kilometres. So people literally ride from one LGA to the other and that sort of thing. But it's something that I actually would passionately like to get up off the ground, because we don't have it in our areas and that sort of thing. And people are crying for it. In COVID, I had heaps of dramas with heaps of people coming and parking on the fire trail and that sort of thing. So for me, I think we need to not only maintain what we have, it's also about developing new ones so we don't love the old ones to death, so that people can move about Logan as a city as a whole and they don't constantly go to that one spot and go and degrade that one spot, so that we can provide them with opportunities to go elsewhere. Because you look on that Brisbane City Council site about the different trails, how long they are, the grades that they've got on each of them. And that's what people have asked me for with the Spring Mountain Forest Park. They're like, we want it to get graded. We want it to get, and that's like difficulty grading, sorry. We want to know the kilometres and that sort of thing. But so if we can embrace all of this and put it all into a mountain biking strategy, I know it's not going to happen overnight and that sort of thing, but I think it's something we can move forward and progress with. Because mountain biking got huge during COVID, and I think it's just growing as a sport and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Jeremiah.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to throw my support behind this report. I think this is the right thing to do, and what Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Bannon said is right. There needs to be greater consideration for trails around the west of the city. But what I'd like to do is acknowledge Councillor Hall's contribution a few minutes ago. We all know that Councillor Hall is a champion for his community, but I think what we learnt today is that Councillor Hall is a champion for the environment. I'd like to just reassure Councillor Hall that this report does not damage the environment. This report is about taking advantage of our natural assets and making sure that Australians in the most beautiful corner of our country, southeast Queensland, can enjoy the natural assets that God has afforded us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillors, I'm keen to bring this to a close. I've got Councillor Bradley, I'm well aware you have your hand in the air. I was going to give you the last word. But I was just about to say that I note I've got two other quick comments. Would you prefer to go first, Councillor Bradley, or would you like to wait and have the last word? Last word? Awesome. Then we'll go to Councillor Hall, Councillor Raven, and then Councillor Bradley, and we'll close out the debate. Councillor Raven's out. Councillor Hall.
I thank Councillor Jeremiah for his kind words, but no, I don't believe myself to be a champion for the environment. I believe myself to be a champion towards what I believe is right and what I believe the people in my division would believe is right. I wanted to reply a bit towards Councillor Wilcox's statement in that she said, let's not overlove one area. Well, what happens when you spread the problem out to other areas is all of a problem. All of a sudden you've got an issue that was a problem in one area becomes an issue in all these areas, all these places that you want to put it, you know. And at least now we can contain it to one area. But once you start spreading that issue throughout other areas, you know, all of a sudden you've got a thing that you can't control. And by doing this, we're endorsing people to go up into these mountains and to disrupt these environments. And I don't believe that's something that council should do. If people want to do it, they should do it on their own steam. I don't think they need council's endorsement to go out there and hurt themselves on these trails, you know, or disrupt the environment over there. Let's leave these areas as they are, okay? Let's leave them for the inhabitants of these areas so that they have a place to go. Because once they're gone, they've got nowhere to go. And that's the end of the day, is about sharing and having balance in what we do. You know, we can't keep taking and taking and taking and thinking that these things are going to be able to go somewhere else, because eventually they won't. And that's my final statement to it. But I thank Jeremiah for his kind words.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Raven, make it snappy.
I had to tag back in when you said that redistributing the load in one place would spread the problem all over the city. The responsible use of our environmental corridors and our bushland means that people care about it more and they work hard to preserve it, just as the volunteers that Councillor Stemp refers to take very good care of their space. The challenge of having everyone concentrated into one field would be as if we took every kid who plays rugby league in Logan and made them play at Brothers. The grass would not grow because you can't have that many people using one space at one time, and that's what's happening to the tracks at the moment. You spread it out, it all gets used responsibly, it engages more volunteers who live close to those areas and they take care of the tracks, and you get what Mr Mayor wants, which is more people being active in our city and caring about the environment nearly as much as you do, Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. I'm going to allow Councillor Bradley the last word. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. I ask my councillor colleagues to please support me in going back to what I specifically asked for, a mountain biking strategy, not an active Logan strategy or whatever else it's called. This would fall underneath that overarching getting everyone active out into our city and different trails, etc. I specifically asked for a mountain biking strategy because there are issues now, and if we do not address them, we will have no environment left. There is already an audit done on Spring Mountain, just so you know, Forest Park, Councillor Wilcox. And, you know, once an audit is done, it's brought to Council's attention. Council should be addressing it. I think there's a legal obligation. Once an audit has been done, there is a legal obligation, in my opinion, to address it. This does not address it. We need a specific mountain biking strategy. And I'm going to ask that we defer this so that we actually get it.
Okay, I'm going to test the room before I do. Councillor Lane?
Can I just ask a quick question? So we've got the existing recreation trail strategy finishing in 2020. We've got the active Logan strategy implementation plan 20 to 24. And we've got the trails subgroup comprising, strategies. What Councillor Bradley's calling for, is that such a big difference given that walkers, do they use the same track as mountain bikers? I'm just a little confused by that. If you could just clarify so I know which way to support or not support Councillor Bradley's motion.
So through the chair, so certainly from my team's perspective and dealing with the other members of the task group, when considering the general business request, which asked about considering the development of a mountain bike strategy, the feedback was to incorporate that into a more inclusive strategy looking at all of those multi-use users of those trails was the appropriate course of action. The matters that I believe are being raised now are around immediate management and resourcing to address those issues that have been identified in the audit. That is different to a strategy. That is an operational response to and funding support to deal with current issues.
Okay. All right, councillors, you have a recommendation on the board in front of you. Councillor Bradley has asked if we consider deferring, so what we're going to do is I'm going to see, because some of you expressed strong support for the existing motion, we're going to see if that motion gets up. If it does, then that decision will be made and we will look at how we can provide Councillor Bradley with support with regard to the immediate management of the situation that she has in her corner of the world. The other alternative is to defer, and the deferral will mean that work will need to occur on this particular report between now and next week, which will further integrate the work that Councillor Bradley felt was missing from this report. My sense is that, and I'm in your hands, is that we haven't met Councillor Bradley's desired outcome with regard to this report. So I would ask you to consider that when you vote. Okay, have I got anyone who would like to move the motion that's on the board in front of you? Councillor Raven has moved the motion. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Okay, there is no seconder for the motion. I now need an alternate motion.
Can we defer, please, until Tuesday, I think? Wednesday.
Won't we require some instructions for the officers between now and then?
Yeah, to work on a mountain bike strategy. That's what we.
I don't know that they can produce an entire strategy.
They're not going to do that.
This is a strategy at the moment.
Can I just ask then that we go back to what the original, either we go back to the original recommendation, or we just defer until and have discussions between now and Wednesday.
I suppose I'm just concerned that we'll be in the same position come next Wednesday if we don't provide the manager with some direction.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I am in your hands. So I've got Councillor Bannon.
Through the chair, I want this to happen. The only reason I'm half thinking about deferring it is because I'm a bit lost here. I'm not comfortable to vote on it just yet. So I'd like to defer it purely because I really want to talk to Councillor Bradley to find out where she's going with it and where I've missed something in the whole thing. I actually support this, but I don't think it's going to hurt just to wait a little bit so we can get Councillor Bradley's thoughts. If someone's so passionate, like she clearly is, I think it's worth talking to her about.
Thanks, Councillor Bannon. Councillor Raven.
Just to be clear, that no further work that will change it to what Councillor Bradley wants will happen between now and next week. But what Councillor Bradley wants is very specific and separate to what this is. I agree with her on that. What she asked for was a mountain biking strategy. I don't even think the word strategy is the hang-up, because strategies are big and they're slow and they require consultation. You want issues addressed immediately, from what I understand.
I want a strategy. I want a strategy. That's
you want
what
maintenance done. But anyway, nothing will change on this report. Do I have the floor? Am I allowed to speak without interruption?
Councillor Bradley, please allow Councillor Raven to continue.
So nothing will change in this report between now and then. My suggestion would be that you endorse the strategy, but then specifically call for the Parks Manager to bring something back for Councillor Bradley that addresses her immediate concerns regarding the audit at Round Mountain, or Spring Mountain, sorry, that she's articulated very well, but it doesn't meet, I agree with her, this doesn't meet her GB request. It sort of meets it, it incorporates it, but I think this piece of work is valuable, and it'll ultimately come back to us again later if we don't vote for it now anyway, I suspect, Nigel. But that would be my suggested way forward.
I've already put the motion forward.
No, that's fine.
And it's failed, so we don't have the luxury of that choice at the moment. Councillor Bradley?
Yeah, I strongly encourage my councillor colleagues that we defer it to a future, either a future, it's up there for a future city lifestyle committee. I'm happy to move that.
I'm just not keen to actually have this debate in a month's time where we're actually relitigating the exact same issues. I'll just flag that because I actually don't regard that as a clear indication of how we would like officers to move forward. Councillor Lang.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So, Nigel, just a quick question. When this general business item came up, it was very clearly said that Councillor Bradley was seeking a mountain biking strategy, and you said the words that we then looked at it and decided that this would be incorporated in. Who is we? Did someone go back to Councillor Bradley and ask for clarification on what she specifically asked for in the meeting, or was it a group thing that we will tie this in together and you know, as you do when you look at the bigger picture, some individual things go by. I'm just asking that question.
Through the chair, there's as Nigel said earlier, it was a group that is already formed that comprises the Parks Manager, the Economic Development Strategy Manager, the Sports Leisure Facility Manager, and as Nigel's been saying all the way along, we appreciate that there are some parks that are overused. We also know that our responsibility as officers is to look holistically across the city and also to engage across all forms of active recreation, and that's what this was trying to do. We understand that the councillor is particularly passionate about mountain biking in that division, and that's fantastic. What we're also trying to look at is this holistically across all active recreation. Sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Councillor Bradley.
Can I speak?
Yep.
Chair, thank you. This is to be looking at the whole city, not just Division 1, hence why I said about all the other areas of the city that have issues. People creating their own trails. We do not have a strategy for the whole city. In fact, Underwood Park isn't even on your trail list. Either is Cornubia. So, you know, how can you actually say that you're going to, you know, have that strategy for when it's not even in there? I'm sorry, it's been missed. This is why I've asked specifically for a mountain bike strategy, not for something else, which we decided.
Okay, councillors, Before you have an amendment that the matter be deferred to a future City Lifestyle Committee meeting for further consideration. Can I have someone to move that motion? Councillor Bradley has moved the motion. Councillor Lane has seconded the motion. Can I have a show of hands, those who are in favour? Okay, so keep your hands up please, so the minute clerk. We have the Mayor, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Lane, Councillor Hall, Councillor Fraser, Councillor Heremiah, Councillor Bannon, Councillor Stemp, Councillor Wilcox. What are you doing, Councillor Murphy?
I'm going to abstain just at this moment. I'm wondering whether we can get an outcome for Councillor Bradley with an alter of the motion. Like, can we address the concerns that she has straight away? Can we allocate for these problems to be addressed? I'm just trying not to delay it for Councillor Bradley at this stage. But if this is the only way that we can get this to move forward, then I'll support the motion.
Yeah, so the motion's actually up. So Councillor Murphy, you're going to abstain. I too am going to abstain on this occasion. And that's
Against.
done.
Against.
And Councillor Raven is against. My apologies. All right, thanks everyone. That was exhausting, I'm sure. Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that when we're putting these motions up, that we be more specific, and at the same time, the amendment that the resolution you put up, to be more specific. You could have actually put there to address the specific concerns brought about in this meeting or something like that. Instead, you've left it very open again. So when you put these GB items up, please be more specific.
Noted. Okay, thank you everyone. Now I am cognisant that we have a whole of council meeting at 12:30. We've still got an item that we need to address, so I'm going to actually move forward at this point in time. So this is moving into confidential, so you have a confidential report before you. It's 5.3. Before we move into confidential, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest that they need to declare? No, there being no conflicts of interest, can I have someone to please move me into confidential? Councillor Bradley has moved me into confidential. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Murphy. By show of hands, those in favour? Councillor Raven, are you in favour? That is unanimously supported. We'll move into confidential and suspend recording. Thank you, Betty. Thank you, everyone upstairs. Adjourn.
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 Happy to move to adjourn the meeting.
May I just check that that is the process? Ladies, if we're adjourning, what do I need to do?
Yeah, maybe a motion to adjourn, and you do need to specify the time and date.
Can you offer me a time?
Don't worry, I've got lots of questions to be able to.
Silvio, any idea how long special council meeting may run?
Depends on how many questions we ask.
That's right. Okay.
You wish.
Okay. Thank you. I have a... Sorry, we're going to need to adjourn the meeting until 1:30 today. Could I have someone who's prepared to move that motion for me? Councillor Raven has moved. Councillor Lane has seconded. By a show of hands. That is unanimously supported. Thank you, everyone. The special council meeting will commence at
12.
They need 10 minutes. Unfortunately, it's going to have to be
12:40. All right, everyone, can you please take your seats? Thank you for your patience, everyone. I know it's been a very long day, and councillors, I thank you for your support through the City Lifestyle Committee. We've had some really robust debate today. So, as you are aware, we actually adjourned the City Lifestyle Committee until this afternoon so that we would be able to continue. We were working through a confidential item, so I'm going to ask that once again we move into confidential, and please allow me, I'll just actually track this down for you. So, councillors, we're moving into item 7.1, which is a confidential report. I beg your pardon, I'm just taking instruction that we need to reopen the meeting from adjournment first, so forgive me. Do I have a mover? I have a mover in Councillor Raven, I have a seconder in Councillor Hall. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Lovely, thank you. And thank you for your patience, everybody, I appreciate it. Okay, I'm just losing some of my notes. All right, councillors, we're going to move into confidential so that we can address our 7.1. Could I please have a mover to move us into confidential? Councillor Bradley has moved us into confidential. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stemp has seconded that we move into confidential. Could I please have a show of hands? That is unanimously supported. Thank you. We will now cease recording as we move into confidential. All right, councillors. Mr Mayor.
I have a GB if you're going to ask.
I will in due course, Mr Mayor, I promise. Okay, councillors, you have a recommendation in front of you. Is there anyone happy to move that recommendation? Or do we have perhaps an amendment to the recommendation?
Mr Mayor, you wanted to amend the recommendation?
I don't mind if you amend it. I'm happy with what's there, but if you're not happy...
So you want to go out...
So option 2 reads that the Sport, Leisure and Facilities Manager be requested to provide a report identifying opportunities for the future use of Logan Metro Sports Park.
I'm happy with that.
Hang on a minute.
What?
That's right.
Is that what it said?
Sorry, through the chair, we probably don't need the as detailed in the confidential report. I think it's probably able to drop that, sorry.
My apologies. So the amendment is ahead of you at the moment, but do we not need in open to actually move an amendment to the report? No. Okay. So do I have a mover for the amendment? Mr Mayor.
I'll move it.
Seconded by Councillor Bannon. All those in favour? Thank you, everyone. Now we move on to GB. So, Nigel, do you have any GB for the councillors? Do we have any GB for Nigel? We do. We might start with Mr Mayor and then Councillor Bannon.
Thank you. Girls, can you put that GB? Thank you. Councillors, during my travels, and only in recent times, I visited the Logan Village Falcons. It is flood affected. The flooding has changed somewhat. The development upstream has put in different devices in place, I guess you could say, that the flooding is more consistent and goes for a longer time. As a result of that, Logan Falcons soccer field, the soccer field's okay, but the car park and such is inundated with water for a longer period of time. I've got this recommendation up that the Road Infrastructure Planning Manager, in conjunction with the Sports, Leisure and Facilities Manager, be requested to prepare a report to a future City Infrastructure Committee meeting to consider possible solutions to ongoing localised flooding experienced by the Logan Village Falcons Football Club. I believe that we could actually improve the quality of the facility if we do some small on-site flood mitigation in keeping the water off some of their services. So that's why I put that up there, because at the present time they regularly have visiting teams from other cities coming to that club, and as a result they must think poorly about our city, because the car park is continually underwater as the water continues to come down from upstream over a very long period of time. I've been there twice when it's been flooded, and you can quite clearly see that if some localised mitigation works were put in place, that they wouldn't have this facility underwater for such a long time. So I move that motion, that GB item.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I ask everybody has a look at the GB item that's on the screen ahead of them, and I'll take some questions. Councillor Raven.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a reason why this isn't just being funded through local infrastructure projects?
I don't think that's a very good question, Councillor.
Can I apply for funding to be resolved in any number of my parks through a general business item?
As the area councillor, I'm actually happy to provide some further feedback with regard to this particular issue. It's unbeknownst to me that the Mayor was actually going to bring this to committee ahead of time until he spoke to me recently that he's putting this item up. There's been a considerable amount of hydrology work done around this particular site, and there was concerns regarding the upstream Lend-Lease development and the impact of overland flow across the site. I'm not a hydrologist, so council officers have been very involved. My understanding is that the water flow rate has changed across the site due to detention basins that are upstream. So traditionally what you had was a quicker overland flow that would run away more quickly. What happens now is the water is distributed more evenly across the site, and it takes later for the water to run away. The Falcons have complained to me on numerous occasions regarding this issue, and so when it was raining during the campaign, I hijacked the Mayor and I took him down there so that he could actually see it firsthand. As the area councillor, I don't have the solution to this problem. If I'd had the solution, I actually would have acted on it before now. I need some support in terms of what this report is going to turn up on, how we may be able to do things better. Councillor Avon, perhaps some LIP funding can address the issue, but I would argue that this is a facility that didn't formerly have this issue. It now services over 300 people. The grounds and the car park are completely inundated, and it actually becomes quite a water feature. The Falcons are very proactive in putting out on social media their frustrations with this, but they haven't yet directed their frustrations at council. They're hoping that collaboratively we can find a solution in order for them to move forward. I didn't have a way forward, so I appreciate a report coming up, and particularly in conjunction with Sport, Leisure and Facilities as well as RIP to navigate a way forward. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Thank you, Councillor Raven. Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, thank you. Having had my car flooded at the Queensland tennis in the city, I'm supportive of this, as long as there is an option if it is a LIP funded project. That is.
I can't say that it will be. It may be outside of the scope. I just don't know.
Yeah.
I've got Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. Just curious as to what mitigation they would be discussing on this.
As this is the Mayor's
you'll have to wait and see, really.
That's up to the officers.
consideration. I don't know what discussions the Mayor's had offline, I'm sorry.
It may be a bung wall, it may be some harder surface type containment, but it's very flat, and the water is not that deep, so it wouldn't take a lot. Well, this is just me. It wouldn't take too much to persuade the water to go elsewhere. But the problem is that it's so confining with the water all around that car park, into the car park, onto the road. It wouldn't take a lot to move it aside. But I'm not an officer, that's why I'm asking for a report.
The reason why I ask is I've asked for possible solutions for a hydrologist has been built a bridge, built a basin underneath it at the end of Spring Mountain Drive. The water course has changed. It floods about, I don't know, probably about 7 backyards that people live on. We've got a park run path. I have no idea why they built it there, but I'm like, it floods here at least once a year. It's going to lift that concrete and stuff like that. I'm not getting any leverage, and I'm not getting anywhere for a possible solution for about 7 residents that have half their backyard flooded. And I can clearly see that what has happened under a brand new bridge leading into a peak development has altered the course of the water. But I keep getting told, no, you can't go in there and we can't do any of this, that and the other thing, because then we're ultimately altering the course of the water. And I'm like, well, you kind of have, because you've done this over here, you've done this under the bridge, and you've stopped it actually flowing to where it wants to get. So for me, I'm a bit, why is this one so special? I know it's a football club, but I've got residents that have got, it's setting a precedent. because if my residents in Div 11 see that that's coming up to help a football club, they're going to go, well, hey, I've contacted the state member, I've got the local councillor involved, and they're not getting anywhere, and they've got the Q50 and the Q100 flood lines, which flood at least once a year in the rainy season, possibly twice a year and that sort of thing. So for me, I think this is setting a precedent.
So Councillor Wilcox, I will remind you this is a council asset though that we're looking at here. So you may be well advised to direct your questions to the red guys who actually aren't here to be able to answer them for you. I'm sorry, I don't think our SL and F people, I don't think our sport, leisure and facility people are the right people to answer questions around overflow and flow, that's all. Do we have any other questions? Okay, the Mayor has got a motion up on the board. Do I have a seconder for the motion? Well, I'm happy to second it. Thank you. Actually, did I have a seconder other than me? I'm happy to do it myself otherwise. But so, Councillor Bradley, can I see by a show of hands those who are in support of the report? I'm intrigued that councillors aren't supporting reports, so I'll just be mindful of that as we move forward. So, all those in favour, we have the Mayor, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Lane, Councillor Raven, I'm getting tired, sorry, Councillor Hall, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Jeremiah, are you opposed or abstaining?
Against.
Against. Councillor Bannon, against. Councillor Stemp in favour. Councillor Wilcox?
Against.
Against. And Councillor Murphy in favour. So that's carried. And of course I'm in favour. Okay, GB, I still have another item from Councillor Bannon. A question for, we'll be there in a second, so no other GB for Nigel? No, awesome. Thank you, Nigel, that was a marathon. I appreciate your efforts. Okay. I note that due to social distancing restrictions, not all managers or staff could attend today. That being said, does anyone have any GB items for the Director? I'm thinking Councillor Bannon. Thank you.
It's just quick. It's just a thank you to Katie for some of your staff. I had some issues on Thursday last week about, which is funny, about the walking trails and bushfire hazards through Munrooban. I called your staff and they were there the next day and they just couldn't have been more helpful. And also a massive shout out to Candy because she just did the Rotary Parkage in Boomba and I've just been flooded with positive things about how people are asking me to go take photos of what they've seen down there. So, like, yeah, couldn't be happier with your staff.
Lovely, thank you. Any other GB for Katie? Katie, do you have any GB for us?
I have one really quick GB, and that's to congratulate Nigel on achieving 25 years of service at Council on Friday.
Congratulations, Nigel. You're a great asset to it.
25 years. So I think we can all appreciate that a quarter century of dedication to serving the Logan community is phenomenal, and responsible for some of the things like Logan Entertainment Centre, Logan Metro, and particularly supporting his team to do their best work to support the community, and has been a massive support to me as well. So thank you and congratulations, Nigel.
Yeah, well done. Great note to finish on. Thank you, everyone. That completes our agenda for today. I declare the City Lifestyle Committee meeting of the 30th of September 2020 closed at 1:50 p.m.